Good morning and welcome to our meeting of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board. We have board members participating in person at our offices in Fresno, Bakersfield, and Modesto. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence other communication devices such as your cell phone. During the meeting, all public participants will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. After each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. The clerk will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. Madam Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Chiesa.
Here.
Mr. Couch.
Here.
Ms. Escutia Brayton. Here. Ms. Lewis. Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Mendez.
Here.
Dr. Pacheco Warner. Mr. Pereira.
Here.
Mr. Reyna. Mr. Rickman.
Here.
Mr. Robinson. Mr. Rodriguez.
Here.
Dr. Sheriffs. Ms. Nguyen. Here. Ms. Shuklian.
Here.
To the chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, please join me in saluting our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next item is approval of the consent calendar. These are items 15 through 23. These items are considered routine and are typically approved by a single vote. Before the board takes actions, member of the public will have an opportunity to comment on any item on the consent calendar. Do we have any public comment for the consent calendar?
Bakersfield, do you have any public comment for the consent calendar?
No public comment in Bakersfield?
Thank you. Modesto, do you have any public comment for the consent calendar?
No public comments in Modesto.
Are there any members of the public in Fresno that wish to comment on this calendar items? We do have one online, Thomas Menz.
Good morning, Thomas.
Just a few final thoughts with respect to item 8, this past wood burning curtailment season. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And it has been a good morning for me so far. PM2.5 levels were within World Health Organization recommended annual exposure levels, and I was able to go outside and do my 5 miles, the cardio.
Excuse me,
that
Thomas.
recommends. Yeah.
Thomas, you said item 8?
Yeah,
That's a
item 8
regular-
of last month I'm trying to comment on.
Okay, I'll open public comment when that item comes before us. Right
For
now, we're
last
taking
month,
comments.
this is for March. This would be for March.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. Sorry to
All right.
interrupt you.
That's quite all right. Later this morning, my neighbor will probably wake up too, and I do sometimes entertain the hope, I confess, that he might not. But if and when he awakens, he will likely start a fire in his wood stove to take the chill off, the mercury having descended to 52 degrees overnight, and I'll need to wear a mask if I elect to go outside and get after those water spouts in my little fruit orchard. So I'll listen to you all instead here. I'd like to describe my neighbor's wood stove. In 1973, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries imposed an oil embargo, and the world price per barrel quadrupled. And folks who heated their home with oil, mostly on the East Coast, with good Yankee resolve, started installing wood stoves. And some of that thinking penetrated and infecting California. Oh, what if the price of natural gas were to rise as well? And tens of thousands of these wood stoves were installed here, which was a bit silly because, unlike now, the US in the 70s was completely insulated from the world price of natural gas, an entirely separate market, as domestic production covered all our consumption. So I can remember my neighbor in 1973 showing off his new wood stove and pointing out that at night he could load the thing with logs and use the damper to restrict the flow of air to the fire, and it would burn slowly, releasing the heat without the necessity of him having to get up to stoke the blaze. Well, I couldn't help but notice that a fire starved of oxygen produces a lot more smoke. And well, that wood stove, that single wood stove, has utterly altered the quality of life here. Well, that neighbor suffered a massive stroke about 20 years later. We know from studies in Scandinavian countries that the risk of stroke is elevated by greater than 70% in homes that use a wood stove as a primary source of heat. But that wood stove lives on. And the district estimated in 2018, at the time of the last major SIP revision, that there were something like 5,000 of these older, highly polluting wood stoves still in daily use in the valley. Now I'm going to go a little bit over.
Yeah,
Because
give you
I
about
was
10 more
interrupted,
seconds
could
since
I please?
well, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds to finish up since
The
I did
interruption was
interrupt.
longer than 10 seconds, and I would like
That's
to
all
be-
right. That's 5 seconds now, Thomas.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Online comments?
No further comments.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to public comment. This time is provided by members of the public to, oh, wait, I forgot. Thanks,
Move to
buddy.
approve?
We have a motion by
I'll
Supervisor
second this
McCauley
motion.
with a second by Supervisor Mendez. Roll call.
Okay, Mr. Chiesa,
Aye.
Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Escutia Brayton,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez.
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs,
Yes.
Ms. Nguyen,
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian.
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Okay, Now we can move on. That's why we have a vice chair. Thank you. Public comment. This time is provided for members of the public to address the board on matters within the board's jurisdiction. Members of the public are requested to reserve comments on agenda items 8 through 11 until those items are heard. Each of these items will include a separate opportunity for public comment at that time. Please note that state law prohibits the board from taking action on items not listed on the agenda. So do we have anybody who would like to speak for public comment this morning besides Mr. Chiesa?
Bakersfield, do you have any public comments?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Modesto, do you have any public comments?
No public comments in Modesto.
Any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment at this time? Seeing none in person, I'll go online. Miss Connie Young.
Good morning, Connie.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. We can.
Great, thank you. So good morning. I'm Connie Young, Fresno resident, retired registered nurse, and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby and with the Earth Day Fresno planning team. April is Earth Month, and I have 2 quick reminders of Earth-friendly events that are happening soon. You're all invited to Earth Day Fresno, a free community-wide Earth Day festival that will be held this Saturday, April 18th, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on the beautiful west lawn of Fresno City College. There will be lots of organizations and vendors promoting ideas and products that will help reduce air pollution. Toyota, Kia, and possibly Tesla will have EVs for folks to test drive. EVs are quick, quiet, and clean, which means cleaner air for all of us. In the Green Home and Garden Show, exhibitors will provide information about home electrification and clean transportation and show examples of ways to save energy, water, and money at home. Local bike groups and businesses are hosting a morning ride to the event, free valet bike parking, and a bike swap where cyclists may trade gently used bike parts, tools, and accessories. In addition to the screening of the documentary Thin Ice, The Inside Story of Climate Science, there will also be a presentation by the Sierra Resource Conservation District on the benefits of healthy ecosystems. Check out the Anthropocene art show in the old administration building, or make your own shopping bag, kite, or other project in the do-it-yourself zone. Gardeners will find lots of information about native plants, succulents, pollinator gardens, bees, and sustainable gardening practices. Of course, you'll want to stop at the Valley Air District booth for the latest information about air quality resources. And when you need a break from all the excitement, grab some food from a food truck, have a seat, and enjoy the live entertainment. Then, next Thursday, April 23rd, climatologist and geophysicist Dr. Michael E. Mann will speak at 11 a.m. at Fresno City College in the old administration building. Dr. Mann is the director of the Center for Science, Sustainability, and the Media at the University of Pennsylvania. His topic will be Science Under Siege, which will cover the politically and ideologically motivated opposition to science in today's world. Since the Air District prides itself on making science-based decisions, you may be interested in Dr. Mann's thoughts about the efforts by some to undermine that approach. I hope to see you this Saturday and next Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you for that information, Connie, and for the plug for the Air District. All right. Do we have anybody else?
Yes, we do. Thomas Menz.
Hi,
online.
Thomas.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway, the district estimated in 2018, at the time of the last SIP revision, that there were something like 5,000 of these older, highly polluting wood stoves still in daily use in the valley. And we may have lost a fifth of that number since, thanks to the generous incentives you offer and a new requirement to remove those devices when a home is sold. But other communities have simply banned their use outright, and it is a point of frustration that this air district hasn't. That there are perfectly good control measures that other areas have implemented that this district refuses to. Health and safety measures that would greatly improve our air quality, certainly mine. And why is that? Why don't we? Well, as Dr. Pacheco-Warner commented last month, because those measures are being held in reserve as a sort of a piggy bank for possible future use as a contingency. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not the fault of EPA. That's on you. There is no shortage of other control measures to use for contingencies. If you can't think of any, talk to CVAC or talk to CCEJN, talk to the Valley Asthma Collaborative. They'll give you a list, long list. They'll give you an earful. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other?
No further online comments.
Okay, then we will move on to our next item, which is our star recognition years of service milestones, and we have got a crowd in here today.
Yes. Yes, we do. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board, Adriana Majowicz, Director of HR. It is a pleasure to be here this morning and an honor to present the following item before you. As you are aware and have heard many times, an essential component to the district's STAR culture is ensuring to recognize our employees' contributions. So in light of keeping with this commitment, we are proud to formally recognize and show our appreciation to the individuals who have reached a service milestone during the first quarter of 2026. To those, we appreciate your contributions. Thank you for your commitment and your service to the district over the years. If you've joined us this morning, I'll ask that you stand as I call your name and remain standing through the item. So we have folks in Fresno today, and starting with 5 years of service, we have Patrick Chimenti, Air Quality Specialist. Sean Smith, Air Quality Instrument Specialist. Stephanie Ng, Director of Community Strategies and Resources. Ryan Belaine, Senior Air Quality Specialist. For 10 years of service, we have Misa Velasco, Staff Technician. Cassandra Melching, Air Quality Education Representative. For 15 years of service, we have Robert Gillis, Program Manager. Duamua, Air Quality Specialist. Jason Lawler, Director of Compliance. For 20 years of service, we have Sajad Ahmad, Senior Air Quality Engineer. And Glenn Ramming, Supervising Air Quality Inspector. For 25 years of service, we have Shiraz Gill, Deputy Air Pollution Control Officer. And Aaron Tarango, Program Manager. Congratulations, everyone, and thank you for your years of service. Thank you, Board.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. I don't know if Vito was counting. I think I got 185 years of experience there. Thank you, Adriana. Okay, our next item is a report on District Citizens Advisory Committee activities. There, I'm looking around. Don't run.
Yeah.
Good morning, Manuel.
Good morning. I think what the 25-year and the 30-year, we would ask the board to deny any retirement, guarantee signing on the line for 10 more years, no matter what. So some of them over here will not, and some are over there. Forget it, you're not retiring, including the front diocese part of this up here. So anyway, in your packet, again, Manuel Cunha, a member of the CAC. we had quite a board meeting. I do want to acknowledge Shiraz Gill did the report for Samir on some of the activities going on with the electric vehicles and other programs. Mobile Sources, Michelle Buffington from CARB is the new person in charge of the truck program, and she's got quite a challenge there, but she's doing a great job, and she also appeared by virtual. Then the rules were presented by the staff here on the rules currently going on for our SIPs, the requirements. The item that took quite a bit of discussion was SB 253 and 261 by the legislature, which is the $1 billion company that makes over $1 billion gross annually, or the $500 million company has to report to CARB on the greenhouse activities for the products. Very costly, and working on scope 1 and 2 and 3. There's a new scope called 3 for the $1 billion company, but it's to find out where that can came from, that those peaches go in, where that paper box came from. And then what I'm saying from that point of the discussions was that the company has to find out if those people they're buying products from are in some type of cap program of reducing those activities of climate change and improving, will be very costly, even as far as to find out where those peaches came from and tracking those peaches of what farm, and is that farm doing something. A lot of discussion, heavy discussion, and I think it's not over with, because it's far reaching. It is really far reaching. And I don't believe the authority of CARB should be there. And many of our CAC members felt the same way. Excuse me. Today, you'll have an item on the agenda, the Ag Burn, quite a bit of discussion and support for the funding, and even a recommendation letter went forward to the to Robert Rivas and to the governor, as well as to the chair of ARB. And then 617, a great job that's been going on there with the district, with the 4 617 communities. Again, I commend the board, the staff, for really doing a great job on that and trying to meet with those community needs. And so that's the report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
All right, thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions for Manuel? Thanks, Manuel. Okay, our next item is a review and provide comment on the 2025 annual report to the community.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, board members. It's my pleasure to get this item presented here to get this going. I'm very excited about the draft 2025 annual report to the community that we have in front of you for review. You do have a draft version, hopefully all of you in front of you to take a look at. Those are printed in-house, but once we're done with the finalization of the report, then we do professionally print those and make them available. I want to acknowledge, just first and foremost, Jamie and her team. Just a little shout out to their team for the hard work that they once again put this year. There's a couple folks here in the audience, but there's a bigger team behind the scenes that worked really hard to once again, I think, put together a really nicely done report. Just to remind the board, this is a report that really tries to make the very complicated work that this board does as consumable as possible for residents, businesses, policymakers, and others throughout the Valley, and actually even bigger audiences in Sacramento and DC, aware of the real work that's going on here in the San Joaquin Valley. It really tries to highlight the progress that we've made, tries to provide, again, consumable information about what the emissions issues are, what the challenges in the region are, as well as some of the work that's to come to keep moving forward in our clean air public health mission. Once this report is finalized, after getting feedback today, we do distribute this report broadly. We have, for example, internal committees, the Citizen Advisory Committee, the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, others that we work with on a regular basis that would immediately get access to this report. We get it out there to the regulated communities, economic development corporations, realty organizations, NGOs, community-based organizations, anybody basically that's out there working in some way in this clean air space. Elected officials are another very interested party to really get updates on where we are with working on clean air objectives. And of course, as we throughout the year, when we go out there and go to events, do presentations, it's been very useful to have this available as a really good tool, again, to just highlight some of the work that's going on here. So I will kind of just jump. Typically, the way we try to review this is we actually just walk through the report in a kind of very quick fashion and highlight what's in there. And then as you have any ideas, it's a pretty informal process. Feel free to jump in and ask questions. And if you have any suggestions, we're able to take those suggestions today. And then after this meeting, once we've gotten feedback from the board and the public, we can work to finalize this report after this meeting. So with that, I'll just maybe, did I miss anything, Jamie? Just jump right into it. Okay. We'll just jump into the report. We get, once again, a beautiful cover highlighting different parts of the valley and noting also, by the way, this is an award-winning publication. This is actually won a national award, and so very, very proud of that. Going to pages 4 and 5, wanted to just highlight once again per past precedents, really just again, very high level consumable message here from the district about the progress that we made, the collaboration that it took to hit that progress. And then of course, the fact that there are significant challenges remaining that we need to continue working on. That by no means is the work done. And there are a lot of opportunities going into the future to keep improving air quality and just try to, basically bring that home for the reader. If they read that one letter, at least get a sense of where the valley has been on this journey. Wonderful page there with these really nice photos of the wonderful board that we have here, the leadership of the district. And then pages 6 and 7 really get into kind of the 101 of who we are, what our mission is, what our vision is, our budget, and essentially at that very high level, what our budget is and where the funding goes. Our core values, this is something that the board has worked on year after year to keep putting those in place and representing, who we are as an agency. And those are all listed here so the public can see transparently what the values of the air district are. And then right out the gate, pages 8 and 9, really talking about the importance of the work. So why it's important to clean the air in terms of public health on page 8, and some of the issues that are associated with air pollution in terms of how it impacts public health. And of course, explaining why it's important. And then page 9, at a very high level, what we saw this last year in terms of record improvement actually in 2025 with respect to reducing pollution, and then seeing that actually show up with respect to ozone and PM 2.5 concentrations throughout the year. And it was a record year. And this report, in many ways, will try to highlight that progress and really an illustration of what happens when you work together, when you reduce air pollution, you do see a result at the end. And that really is important to point to when we keep asking for more as we move forward into our next chapters of this journey. Pages 10 and 11 really get into trying to explain to the public what ozone is, what some of the different pollutants are, a little bit of 101 in terms of air pollution and the importance, for example, of reducing NOx emissions, where PM comes from, where ozone comes from. Page 11 is really just an updated representation of where different emission sources are when it comes to some of the key pollutants that we focus on. So that's just an updated information so the public can peruse that and get an updated understanding of where the air pollution issues originate from. And then pages 12 and 13 really highlight, again, some of the progress that's been made over the years. Page 12 is a high level that really just has that really stark comparison between where we used to be and where we are today. And you can see there are very significant reductions over the years across the things that we regulate, the things that the state and the federal government also regulates, mobile sources, stationary sources. You see substantial reductions across the board. Page 13, there's actually some new graphics here that I just wanted to point out and just highlight some of the updated efforts to try to represent some pretty complex information here. So the top chart kind of shows, and this has been here in the last year or two, but it's updated now, shows some of the trends in terms of VMT growth, population growth, and also growth in good air quality days over, while you're also seeing significant growth in the valley. And then on the bottom side of that graph, reductions in pollution at the same time. which I think is really important to understand, that you can have growth, but then work really hard to actually keep reducing emissions even while you're having growth. Bottom of page 13, what we're trying to show in that graph is kind of where we used to be relative to federal standards back in, say, 2003, where there was a few green dots, meaning those were the standards that were met at that time, versus where we are today in 2025, where you're seeing a lot more green dots relative to the different federal standards. So just another way of trying to show, sort of the progress that's been made, but also, as you'll see there, still blue dots, quite a bit of blue dots that are left, which shows, basically the ongoing work that still needs to happen to meet those standards. Pages 14 and 15 continue to show the progress that we've made with ozone, and which is one of our key pollutants that we focus on. This is mainly a summertime issue, so we really wanted to focus in now on more specifics around what are the real issues that we're seeing. In this case with ozone, the improvements that we've made, some really great information on page 15 about where we used to be with ozone concentrations against all the 3 standards that we're now working to meet, the 97, 08, and 15 ozone standards, and how we're making that significant progress across the valley. And you see that also in the map in terms of the color coding and basically where we used to be and where we are today. With PM 2.5, that's pages 16 and 17. Again, what is PM? A little bit of explanation about where it comes from, some graphics to try to explain the characteristics of PM 2.5. And then on page 17, the trends over time. What you'll see on the top chart is where the valley as a whole across different sites have been relative to the standards. You'll see, for example, that we do have parts of the valley that still have some significant remaining challenge, even with all the improvements. But you'll also see in that same chart many parts of the valley that are substantially below these federal standards. And so it's just a really good illustration of just how complex the situation is, and how much progress you actually seen across the valley as a whole, and not just at that one location that maybe still is the challenging location. And then the pie charts kind of represent that just through a donut kind of chart approach in terms of where we used to be with exceedances in both the winter and the annual for PM 2.5 before, and kind of where we are today. And what you'll see there, I'll just point out at the bottom set of pie charts there on page 17, in 2002, where we had about an 80-20 split all year as far as exceedances for the annual standard, now to where it was basically 1% this last year of days that were exceeding the across the valley, the annual standard. So definitely a lot of progress that's been made from where we used to be to where we are today, even with that remaining challenge, which is very significant for the region. At this point, I'm actually going to turn it over to Jamie to kind of walk you through, mainly to save my voice too, because I think I've talked quite a bit here. I'm actually going to co-present this with Jamie and have her kind of walk through the rest of the report and get a little bit more into the specifics of what we tried to highlight this year based on the board's priorities this last year and some of the great work that was done by the Valley Air District.
Good morning. I'll go straight into it. On pages 18 and 19, we talk about our residential wood smoke reduction strategy, the commitment that we've had over the past over 20 years to this program. And then we mentioned both the grant program that we have in place. And you'll notice we have a quote there. We've done our best to pepper the report with a handful of quotes from various folks. And then talk about our outreach and the work we do to educate folks on this program with a fun little graphic about electric heat pump and how that works and how that's a great option. On pages 20 and 21, we talk about wildfire smoke. We actually heard yesterday that it's coming, wildfire season's coming, and there might be a fire that they were worried was going to take off yesterday. It did not, but we're there. Wildfire season is year round, and we really work collaboratively, as is mentioned on page 20, with our land managers to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're doing those things in the off season to make sure that the public's educated and are taking those steps to be ready when the wildfires hit. We talk a little bit about our various grant programs and the work that we've done to communicate to the public when we do have those smoke impacts from wildfires. Our Clean Air Room program is a grant program that was giving out indoor air purifiers to residents, and we have a handful of those left in certain communities in the valley. So that program is ongoing in a very limited way. Then we have our Clean Air Centers program. That's a program that, of course, opens clean air centers in locations up and down the valley where folks have a place they can go to escape the poor air quality if maybe they don't have, maybe they're unhoused or their home isn't a place where they feel like they can get clean air. Moving on, pages 22 and 23. Talk a little bit about our planning process. This is the work that the SMER and Tim do on a regular basis to make sure that we have plans in place that are putting us on the road to meeting those standards that Samir mentioned. On the bottom of 23, you have a snapshot of the emissions reductions achieved in the previous year against the plan commitments. We pride ourselves in being above target on all of those metrics. On 24 and 25, we talk about the measures, the regulatory measures that we put in place last year and the ones we're still working on. Just a small snapshot on those regulations that we've taken before the board or that we're currently working on. Page 26 starts what we call the partnership section, and you'll notice we actually changed the color of the page numbers down at the bottom. I'll be honest, this was my favorite section. It talks about how important this work is and that it can't be done without so many partners up and down the valley. The first couple of pages are all about our agricultural partners and really about how these programs are setting the standard nationally for how to work with the ag community in a really productive and effective way to make air quality improvements. We then go through and list a variety of programs, our tractor program, our low dust nut harvester program, our ag pump replacement program, and our zero ag UTV program. On the next page, we mention our yard truck replacement program, our zero emission forklift program, and our Ag Burn Alternative Grant Program. We also talk a little bit throughout this section about how important continued funding is, which is something that Samir and Mark Montalongo have come and mentioned multiple times to your board, and how it's such a priority this year to make sure that continued grant funding comes into the valley. On page 29, we talk about the phase out of open agricultural burning, what a success story it has been, and also how important that continued funding is to continue to get those quantifiable effective emission reductions throughout the valley. Page 30 and 31, we talk about, or I should say on page 30, we talk about the great success we have had in the past with our state and federal partners, how we've been successful in bringing money to the valley and how we need to continue to make sure that we're a priority. Then on page 31, we talk about just some of the events we've been out to with the ag community, tractor crushing. Samir was at UC Merced with the Vine Connect Field Day last year, making sure that in addition to the kind of more warm and fuzzy outreach events that we're at, but that we're also at those more academic, more professional, more technical events where our experts can actually talk to the public and to the regulated community about what's going on. There on the side of page 31, we were recognized by Fresno State Transportation Institute last year. We won a variety of awards, and we just wanted to highlight that. On page 32 and 33, we talk about our work with schools. We've got a great quote there from a local teacher and how that program just continues to grow with new resources for teachers, parents, and administrators. And then we've been working with our public health teams. This is throughout the county. Buddy's looking at me because he recognizes his team. We actually sat down with the Fresno County Public Health Department. We are doing that up and down the valley. We play an active role in the Public Health Consortium. That's a group of all the county public health officers, just to make sure that we're on the same page. John Clausen's team has been working to get data from them to make sure that's informing some of what we do. And when we do have these unique, maybe smoke impacts, that we're all on the same page with messaging. Pages 34 and 35. We are in the middle of a really exciting project with OK Produce. Probably came to your board a couple years ago, but we're now kind of, construction is going on. And it's just a showcase of how we have these really amazing public-private partnerships. The district brings some money to the table in concert with CARB and the CEC. And then we have these really, I think, engaged businesses that say, you know what, we're going to bring some money to the table as well. And I will say, with the case of Brady Matoyan here at OK Produce, the project is tough. His truck drivers love it. So that's what we want to hear. It's worth doing. It makes sense. And we want it to be an example for those businesses that want to do it, but maybe there's not that level of grant funding. Here's some ways that it makes sense even without the grant funding and why it might make sense for you. On page 35, we brought this item to the governing board back at the governing board study session, but it's our growing connection to our economic development partners. And you'll see Supervisor Couch and Samir went down and spoke with Richard Chapman, who actually came to our governing board study session, about the need to make sure that we are communicating through this report and other outreach mechanisms the true look of air quality in the valley, what is actually going on, talking about the improvements and talking about, yes, there's still work to be done. We then have a couple page section on the work being done in our communities, really sitting down one-on-one, face-to-face with our communities to hear their concerns, get their ideas, and then implement them throughout the valley, both in our AB 617 communities and then in underserved communities throughout the valley. We talk about a clean air town hall that occurred down in Arvin, Lamont last year. We talk about some improvements that are going on through road, sidewalk, and bike lane improvements in some of our AB 617 communities. On the next pages, 38 and 39, we talk about some urban greening and vegetative barrier efforts. And then just really how we've been sitting down with communities to hear them. On page 39, we talk about the enhanced community air quality monitoring that occurs, and then some of the community air protection program funding that's actually been distributed throughout the valley, both in our communities here, in our AB 61 communities and in underserved communities throughout the valley. Page 40 and 41 starts a section about those grant programs that haven't already been mentioned. We have this fun infographic that gives a little snapshot of some of our most popular grants and then the really amazing emission reductions that we're seeing through these programs. On 42 and 43, we talk about our landscaping programs. We actually have two. One is for our commercial landscapers. We call that the ZELI program, the Zero Emission Landscaping Equipment Voucher Program. And we have seen tremendous success in the last couple of years with public and private entities taking advantage of that program and swapping out, in some cases, dozens of pieces of equipment. And then, of course, right now we're doing a lot of outreach for our Clean Green Yard Machine program. This is the one that allows residents to either take an old gas-powered lawnmower, destroy it, crush it, get a voucher for a new lawnmower, or if they don't have a piece of equipment to swap out, we'll give them a much smaller little rebate to choose electric. My team's actually been going up and down to the Lowe's and the Costco's, trying to get some signage up in all of those hardware stores to make sure that folks realize what a great program that is. On page 44 and 45, we talk about our Drive Clean in the San Joaquin program. It actually has 3 arms. It has a rebate program, which I'll tell you has been very popular and tends to run out of money fairly quickly. That's if you're going to go buy an electric vehicle, we'll give you a rebate on the purchase of that electric vehicle. We then have our very familiar Tune In, Tune Up program. Those are those weekend events where we do a smog check or emissions check on a vehicle and then can give individuals a voucher to get their vehicle repaired. So you can then go and have it smog checked. Those events continue to be successful. We have one coming up here in Los Banos in just a few days. And then last but not least, we have our replacement program, which works with folks who are low income, who maybe can't afford to transition to a cleaner vehicle. Maybe they're driving around. We've seen some really old vehicles, but maybe they're driving around in a 2000 Honda Accord and it's being held together with duct tape and love. We'll work with them to get them into a much cleaner, either all electric or electric hybrid vehicle. 46 and 47, we talk about our zero and near zero truck replacement program. That's just a fun little graphic that shows you the amount of truck traffic that we have going through the valley, and we do have a lot. On 47, we talk about our Pepsi project, which was a project similar to OK Produce. That project is kind of just on it's 99% done. And as a matter of fact, that truck you see right there, you'll often see driving around the valley. That people have photos on it. We get photos of those trucks out in the wild too, which we appreciate. 48 and 49, we talk about infrastructure. It is such a key element to some of our mobile source programs, making sure whether it's a bigger infrastructure project, working with a school district or municipality, or it's our charge up program that's working with a public or private entity to just put the smaller electric vehicle charging stations in. We see that infrastructure is key. We want to make sure people are aware of it. We also have a school bus program and zero emission school buses. We've been very successful over the past 20 plus years in getting those school buses cleaned up. Our public benefits grant program is highlighted on page 50. This is working with public agencies to get them into cleaner mobile equipment. And it's everything from vehicles, police vehicles. We've done the electric bicycles for police groups as well. These little kind of golf cart type vehicles, let's electrify them and let's get them out to the municipalities. That's been very successful. Then we talk a little bit about the transition that we've had from our laser and drone fireworks show into now. It works. People love it. And we've been educating municipalities, nonprofits, civic organizations about for about the same amount of money as that fireworks show, they can put on a laser show that the public will enjoy just as much as that fireworks show. We then move into a little bit of nuts and bolts of the district, including on page 52, a little mention of another national award that we won for an inventory tracking system for our air quality monitoring team. It's just made us more efficient, more effective, more transparent with money to make sure we understand where all the different whirlybirds and wiggly doos are. I don't know the technical term for any of that stuff, but it's a lot of equipment. We then on page 53 have our air quality monitoring network itemized so people can see where the official federal reference monitors are up and down the valley. 54 and 55, we talk about this amazing team here at the district, about our district star work culture of service, teamwork, attitude, and respect, and how it underpins everything we do. We then talk a little bit about our district selected charities. We select one or two charities in each of the regions throughout the year, and staff then supports those in a variety of ways. Maybe we do a clothing donation, a blood drive, a highway cleanup day, just a way for the district to give back to the community. We select one or two just to make sure that it's really focused and manageable. We talk a little bit about inside the district on 56 and 57. We talk about our administration and operations support, our human resources, legal department, our IT department, then of course mention our Governor Finance Officers Association Award that we get on a yearly basis. 58 and 59, we look into our permits department, a little bit of a quick snapshot of what that team is doing and the work that they've done over the past year. 60 and 61, it's our enforcement department, really prioritizing that we work to give assistance to folks to get them into compliance. That's our number one priority with our enforcement team. 62 and 63, a little snapshot of our additional outreach that we're doing in the community, aside from what you've already seen. Just a little bit of the media relations, the public tools we make available, the events such as the Earth Day event that Connie mentioned, we'll be at a lot of them. So then our multilingual, multicultural outreach, and then how we're working with the public to make sure they're aware of our grant programs. The last page will not be this big. It's just printed that way.
With that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair, and board members for any ideas, suggestions that you may have, so we can work to finalize this report and make it available as quickly as possible to the
All
ballot.
right. Well, thank you, Jamie. I always look forward to it. I just appreciate the clean sharpness, easy to read, very educational, I think, for the public, and a lot of good graphs and whatnot to show where we've been, like you said, and where we are now. So I appreciate it. Supervisor McCauley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree. It's very informative. It's almost like a textbook in a way, and it's just really easy to digest. And one of the favorite things I have about the district that I love is the clean air pitcher program that we do with the youth, and it kind of gets my gears turning about how can we better engage with the next generation of folks. And I just wonder if through this document that we're producing every year, that it might create a good tool to engage with youth around, whether that's the high school, middle school kids, like do a book report on this great document. And I think what that does is it creates our next generation of clean air leaders, right? So just a thought would be, again, a great use of this wonderful document, which we're already producing. So.
Thank you for that. Through the chair, just a quick
Yes.
thought on that too. And I mean, I think that's a wonderful suggestion, and there is validation of the youth. I think getting a lot of value. There may be a board member with perhaps a young child who is an avid reader actually of this report. So I think there is definitely some testimonial that it resonates in many ways. So I think as we think about the Healthier Living Schools program and other outreach that we do, I think that it's a good suggestion of maybe there's some ways to kind of integrate some of this information into that sector of our outreach approach, even more so than we currently do. So,
and I am curious, just have we ever had a contestant winner, from grade school come on and actually start working with the Air District? Because to me, that would just be like really, really cool to see something like that transpire.
You never
good question.
saw Samir's
Samir's
calendar?
artwork?
No,
I'd like to. Yeah, I yes.
There's one of those hanging in the hall.
I'm a pretty good sketcher myself.
All right, Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. Yeah, so much to learn in this, and I volunteer. Let me know when the next blood drive is. I will add to the count. Don't forget. Serious. This is an incredibly good information. Great visuals. The visuals are terrific in terms of how they summarize what's going on. This really great information for the public in terms of our clean air challenges, in terms of the progress we're making, in terms of the ongoing plans, the programs that businesses and the public can utilize, and the Clean Air Quest. It really is the whole package. It really showcases the successful partnerships. It's a fabulous document. As a physician motivated by individual and public health, the annual report as written, though, I think misses a very important opportunity to showcase something that it already shows that we're doing, but doesn't put it in the light, the nexus of our air quality work and the challenge of climate change. Page 30 refers to the potential impacts of climate change. It is not potential impacts. They are happening now. They are documented. They are measurable. They are pushing against our work. They are diminishing the health of the residents of the valley, and notably in terms of wildfire smoke exposure, heat, the changing picture of infectious disease. We take appropriate advantage of many of the greenhouse gas reduction programs, and they're highlighted in this document. Particularly, we take advantage of them for the co-benefits to our air quality challenge. But there are also numerous polls showing that the majority of the public, the majority of registered voters, want the federal government and their public agencies to do more regarding climate change. So thinking about the engagement of the next generation, this is something that's on people's minds. We're doing it. We should be highlighting what we're doing. We're involved in many programs which support the state's commitment to lowering greenhouse gas emissions. And I think we can highlight where that is. Thinking about dairy methane, thinking about incorporation of woody waste products into the fields, into the orchards, into the vineyards. development of hydrogen for electricity generation, support of the Pepsi and the OK produce projects, electrification on I-5 for heavy duty trucks. These are all things we're engaged in that are part of that work for decreasing greenhouse gas emissions as well as improving the air. So we champion these programs. I think we really need to also be championing the fact that what we're doing is having an important impact with greenhouse gas emissions and supporting the state's goals. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Oh, hold on. Samir?
Through the chair. Yeah, I think definitely wanted to share some thoughts as some of the feedback came back. So I'm happy to maybe just sort of compile it and then later maybe offer some suggestions, or I can also just, you know, as you go through the conversation, can also respond. So just let me know how.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think on this suggestion, just wanted to offer that certainly the board has taken positions over the years that are looking for those co-beneficial opportunities. We've definitely we've got a number of examples Dr. Sherris mentioned of where that work is ongoing. That collaboration is critical with our state and federal partners. And many of the initiatives that you're talking about here are absolutely either funded through greenhouse gas reduction funds or are in many ways part of climate initiatives, you know, that give us opportunities to help us with sort of our statutory role and bringing us into compliance with federal standards and dealing with the local air pollution and toxics benefits, but certainly a big nexus between the two. And I think we can find a couple of opportunities in the report to highlight some of that work of the board. You know, for example, I think it could be mentioned a little bit more specifically up front in the letter, as well as perhaps just thinking about this, maybe we can actually add a story also that highlights some of the work that we've done to bring some of these climate initiative related funds and sort of, you know, like summarize essentially what the board has been doing in that space, give the examples, and that way, as you kind of read through the report, you can, with that sort of legend in mind, see, you know, a lot of how the very things that are cited here are also critically tied to some of the other climate work that's been going on. So I think we can do that through probably a couple of strategic amendments to the report, which is, I think this is why we have this review, so to get these types of ideas so we can, and if the board is generally okay with that, that's something we can work on to include in the final report. So just wanted to offer that to the board.
Thank you. All right, Deborah.
Thank you, Chair. I just, first of all, I want to say this is an excellent report and congratulations to staff for the information that you get out to the public and how simplified you make it. You know, it's just absolutely wonderful and the charts are great. I want to pay particular attention to page 46 where there's a graph of our San Joaquin Valley, in particular to the nexus between 99 and Interstate 5. Do we have any statistics on which of those highways has the most travel for heavy duty? Is it 99 or Interstate 5?
I think the short answer is working with our transportation agency partners in the COGS. We should be able to access that. I do believe, based on the latest data, but I would have to verify this, that the 5 still has a bit more of the heavy duty traffic but they're both heavily impacted by heavy duty or class 8, 7-8 trucks. So, but I think if you wanted a little bit more information on that, we're happy to chase it down and
Okay.
provide it.
And I'm going back to something that I've talked about several times before, and this is in reference to page 53, where our monitoring systems are mostly on the 99 side. And I'm looking at Merced County, they're all in the Merced area. And Santa Clara Valley has way more vehicles than we do in the Central Valley. We know that there's a lot of pollution that comes over the mountains into our valley from them, and carbs, and you know, the state of California still does not hold them to a standard that is affecting us. So I know we don't have a lot of monitoring on the 99 side, except from when you start up in Manteca and maybe go down into Kern County. But those numbers, I don't know that they would change much. We do have the winds that come from Monterey that kind of pushes everything over here to the mid part of the Central Valley into the Fresno Valley area. But I'm still interested in seeing what the nexus is between those numbers and being that Interstate 5 is highly traveled and that we get pollution from the Bay Area into our valley. And lastly, I'd like to say is that we put a lot of pressure on people who travel with trucks and residents and fireplaces and all of those things to reduce PM 2.5, NOx, and all the other things that we measure. But the state of California and the federal government have a part in this, especially when it comes to our forestry. When we have forest fires here in the valley or any other place in California, we get affected here in the Central Valley in regards to the smoke and pollution that they produce. And so I'm here, to encourage Dr. Pacheco-Warner again to work with CARBs in regards to the state of California, reducing some of the obstacles that are in the way that keep our state forestry department from going in and clearing out the underbrush and dead trees within our forests, so that that could be something that's less of a problem as far as air pollution in our valley here. I think that the state can do better. And it doesn't seem to be as much of a concern for them as putting the pressure on our local agency to fix the problem. But they have a bigger hand in this than I think we're all willing to admit. So that's kind of my take on it. It may not be a popular subject, but I'm willing to speak it. And I think the state of California needs to do its part to help reduce pollution in our communities, especially here in the Central Valley, because we are backed up to those state and national forests. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Thank you for your comments, Board Member Lewis. Absolutely. That collaboration is key. I will say that this is so timely. Just last week, Robertito asked me, when's the next one, Mom? I think he's tired of reading the other ones. So very, very timely. I really appreciate specifically the effort that has been made to deliver the story around our attainment and our attainment progress and challenges, because I will say that this is helpful, not just in our local community, but I would say for all of my colleagues who go up to Sacramento to do their visits, take the report with you and give it to the electeds you're meeting with, because I do think that we need a broader education on this as well. I'm seeing it as definitely so much in this really drives home this very complex issue of attainment, right? Which is very multifaceted. For me, one of the comments that I did want to also echo Dr. Sheriff's, that I do think that they helping understand like the GGRF investments that are leading to emission reductions is a really fantastic way to continue to, again, see how all these things are affecting, like how we say, for example, in here, right? So many of the different challenges we face have to do with farming. Well, this is why we need all the farming investments to continue to come down, right? For incentives and things like farmer and others. And so continuing to make those connections for folks, I think is really critical at this juncture. I will say that when I first looked at the graphic on, or not the graphic, but the page 19, the picture, I had no idea what that was. So that took me a little bit of time and I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really need to be up on the latest fireplace technology, which is wonderful, I think, for me to know how, this is one of the, I believe, Jamie, help me out here. This is the fireplace. What's on the fireplace is that metal sheet there.
On the chimney?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's just the flashing on the roof.
Flashing, that has nothing to do with.
Okay, so see, that's why I'm like, what does this picture mean? So that's why I was like,
To me, it
okay.
looks like it's actually plugged potentially too, but I'm not sure it doesn't have a rain cap on there, but
Yeah.
no, but yeah, I think that's just a representation of
Okay,
education
so I was a little
on
confused by
reducing
that
wood
one.
smoke.
That's
Yeah.
why
Yeah, it's just a chimney.
I wanted to just kind of point that out for myself. And then I did want to point out that I think that the continued education on the mobile sources is fantastic as well. Like on page 47, the map on the truck flows is fantastic. And even if there was a way to sort of zoom in a little bit more, which there probably isn't because we're weirdly long, but if there was a way to maximize that would be fantastic. But I really think that speaks, that really drives home the point, and maybe we could even reference it in the earlier, kind of see page 46 because of some of the mobile source stuff, right? I do think that this map is such an important part of the report. Then finally, I do appreciate the picture of the air monitor on 52 because can I tell you how many times I've had to look up a picture of the air monitor to explain to Robertito when we go over the air monitoring stuff. So I really appreciate that. And I do think that, for future ones, I was at a conference at UC Merced where I was kind of trying to explain to some college students and community members kind of how an air monitor works. I did my very best. But, I do think that is also something so interesting, especially as more people learn about these independent monitors and kind of understanding the nuances of like what is and why are these monitors unique, what makes them so special, is an opportunity of education for the future because it is sometimes can be puzzling as people start logging into maybe Purple Air more and more, why there's like a monitor somewhere in their community that might say it's the air is at the highest level of pollution, but our app or EPA app is not saying that, right? And so understanding those nuances, I think there's an opportunity there. And I love seeing all the staff pictures. I really love it because I do think that these are the people, right, that really make it, and they're people from our own community. And the permitting by the numbers is a really critical addition. I really, really appreciate that as well. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing the final product. And yes, Chair, I think I will take you up this year and have everybody sign it for Robertito.
Absolutely. You bet. Thank you. All right, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, let me just thank our Executive Director and the staff for putting this together. I think it's a great report. I'm assuming this happens every year when you guys provide this. So one of the challenges that I would put is how do we bring this to schools? How do we make this a curriculum, an integral part of what they learn? Because I'm 50 years old last year, right? I hate to say my age, but it took me to be appointed or to be part of this board to really understand the dynamics of air quality and what it takes to really have good air quality. And yet I'm just learning. I'm immersing myself in this category that we live. It's tangible. So a lot of these students don't really understand it because they're oblivious to what's taking place. When I see a fire, when I see dust from agriculture, I want to blame somebody, but not understanding it really makes it difficult for me, right? So I think if we can take this report and somehow integrate it in schools, make it as a earth science or health science and make it part of their learning, because it's that generation that's going to carry that baton for the future. And I think you do a great job of illustrating it. Now, how do we implement it so that they learn that, hey, wood stuff replacement, ag burning, here are the big things that, these are the amount of tons of nitric oxides that we're taking away when we do stuff like that. So for me, I think the report is great. I just don't want it to be something that circulates every year. And yet the more vital people that I think we can really capture are these students that are in school. So how do we implement that in our education? And that's huge for me because, again, it took me, I'm 50 years old and I was oblivious to a lot of that. And now that I'm immersing myself in air quality, I feel like, wow, I didn't know this. I didn't know that by partnering up with this industry, whether it's ag, whether it's this, that we could remove this much tonnage of nitric oxide. And these kids go through it because it's career pathways that will immerse them in air quality. So I appreciate everything you do. Everything in there is highlighted very well. Appreciate the picture of us. I don't know why the other districts out, the other members that are in, what is it, Stanislaus and or Kern are not involved in that picture. But again, I appreciate everything you guys done. Thank you. And that's all I have, Madam.
And through the chair, I just wanted to say on that really great suggestion that Board Member Rodriguez just mentioned. I think that there I think will be a great opportunity to do some brainstorming. I recommend, and you'll see this later in a few months. I do recommend that perhaps at our study session we have maybe a focused conversation just on that topic about how we the Healthier Living Schools program, and there is actually a lot of active work going on by the team to look at curriculum, to look at kits, and trying to like ramp up basically consistent with the suggestion that was just made. But I think it'd be great to provide an update on some of those efforts, to take even more ideas on it, and have like an actual conversation at that upcoming meeting as we think about some of the areas of focus, when we have an opportunity to really do a deeper dive. So I think it's a great idea. And I spoke at a ag business course just the other day, and found this to be basically my talking points in some ways. I've actually brought copies of the report with me and shared it with these future leaders. So that I think that suggestion applies at many different levels as well, at the younger ages, as well as all the way through university level in terms of how we engage on this topic. There's a lot of interest, as always, on air quality. And so I think it's just a very important suggestion, and one that we are working on, and would love to have a deep dive discussion with the board on how to keep furthering that objective. So appreciate that.
Thank you for your comment. Oh, to be 50 again. Supervisor Pereira.
The chair, I was 62 years old last year, in case you were wondering. Anyways, most of the comments have been made already. There's one though, page 9. To me, a very, very important page. The coloring in the little white box between days meeting and days exceeding. I had to process that about 5 times before I figured it out, that the colors are different. So if maybe we could do something to either darken one or lighten one, or maybe change the days meeting to green or something, I think that'd be a good idea. And I'm really thankful for this page. I still run into people who think our air is not cleaner today than it was 20 years ago. And so I'm gonna print up some of these and post them or pass them out, because I think we do a great job, and people don't necessarily understand or believe it. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions, we will open it up to public comment. Do we have anybody to speak?
Thank you. Bakersfield, do you have any members of the public that would like to comment?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Modesto, do you have any public comments?
No.
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno? Seeing none, we do have a few online. Start with Connie Young.
Hi, Connie.
Well, hello again. Yes, this is Connie Young. First of all, wow, it's a beautiful report. And I don't normally like reports. My eyes kind of glaze over, but I love the pictures. I love the graphics. So somebody put a lot of time and effort into making this a really excellent report. So thank you for that. My comment has to do with page 20, the wildfire smoke. I just feel that this report kind of misses an opportunity both to educate the public about the role of climate change in wildfires and to take credit for all the work that you and the staff do to reduce greenhouse gases. I realize they're kind of mentioned on the side in there. So there's mention of drought, increased temperatures, longer wildfire season. Guess what? Those are all hallmarks of climate change. So I think calling it out and making it a co-equal with forest management, so having a bold heading about climate change and all the good work that you're doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to address this really serious problem would be a marked improvement to this excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. Next up, we have Thomas Menz.
Hi, Thomas.
Good morning. Yes, air quality has certainly improved in the valley, but of course, there is always more to be done. I notice on page 25, commercial charbroiling, and I read the district is currently analyzing additional emission reduction opportunities by implementing an incentive-based control strategy through the district's restaurant charbroiler technology partnership program. Meanwhile, in 2025, New York City has already implemented a mandatory control strategy for existing under-fired charbroilers, targeting high-emission under-fired charbroilers, those cooking greater than 875 pounds of meat a week, with rules that require a 75% reduction in particulate matter. Affected restaurants, mostly those with grills installed before May of 2016, must install DEP certified emission control devices, commonly the electrostatic precipitators or the scrubber systems, such as the Habit restaurant in Clovis has had in place for years now, which quite notably, and to their shame, the Habit restaurant in Fresno and Fig Garden Village has not. And the smoke out there, it smokes out the entire parking lot there, and it gets sucked into the air intake at the adjacent Whole Foods market, I understand. So maybe include in the report to the community why this district hasn't done the same. Here I notice emissions from restaurants are a growing source of directly emitted PM 2.5 in the emissions inventory. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a SIP commitment to at least match what other states or communities have achieved in practice? Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. We do have one more online. Christian Bisher.
Hello, Christian.
Hi, good morning. My name is Christian Bisher. I live in Fresno, and I work with the Central California Environmental Justice Network. Thank you for this document. Yeah, like Connie said, obviously a lot of work went into it. But I believe all this work is ultimately being done to meet those federal attainment standards. And a very important part of those standards is when are they supposed to be met? And in looking through this, I'm not seeing those timelines, those due dates. And so the emission reductions are great, but where are they with the due date? Have we missed it? Are we on track? Again, probably too late for this year, but in next year, where we are with those due dates on the attainment standards would be very helpful, I think, for the community. Second would be the number one core value on page 7 is the protection of public health. And page 8 talks about it, but then I'm not seeing information on public health. So we're making emission reductions, but our asthma cases declining. And you can go into multiple other health outcomes. But again, for next year, I think it'd be useful because like the purpose of those meeting those attainment standards, that the air quality will be better, which we would assume would then lower the negative health impacts. How is the valley on those health impacts? And then lastly, page 12, that NOx reduction chart, that's a pretty standard chart. I think you have one there on the side of the wall, but it goes back to 1980, getting rid of a lot of that old equipment. I think in an annual report to the community, like an update, like how are we doing more recently? And I went and looked, and I didn't see a graphic comparing either 2024 NOx values to 2025 or even the past 2 to 5 years. Like just how NOx reduced more recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
No further comments online.
Okay, this is not an action item, but thank you for all the work that's been put into it, and we look forward to the shiny copy. Thank you. Okay, our next item, number 9, is to adopt proposed amendments to Rule 4101, visible emissions. Your item now. It's in here. That's it.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Jason Lawler, I'm the Director of Compliance here at the district, and I'm here this morning to present the proposed amendments to Rule 4101, the district's visible emissions rule. What did I do? There we go. All right, so Rule 4101 is one of our oldest rules here at the district. It was adopted by the board back in 1992 to limit the emissions of visible air contaminants. Visible emissions are quantified in terms of opacity, which is the extent to which the emissions obstruct the transmission of light. And opacity is expressed as a percentage, which you can see in the graphic there in the lower corner. The higher percentages correlate with greater levels of visible emissions. So generally speaking, the main requirement of the rule states that a person may not discharge visible emissions from any single source other than unconfined water vapor that meets or exceeds 20% opacity for periods aggregating more than 3 minutes in any 1 hour. So how do we evaluate those visible emissions? There's a federal test method, EPA Method 9, which provides a standardized and enforceable way to evaluate and quantify visible emissions from a variety of sources. This method helps determine compliance with regulatory opacity limits, and it's used by staff at the district, by regulated entities, and other agencies around the country. Rule 4101 identifies this widely accepted test method as our standard for visual determination of the opacity of emissions. And since Method 9 relies on an observer's visual judgment, observations are required to be conducted by observers that have been properly trained and certified to accurately read visible emissions in the field. So certification under Method 9 is generally obtained through a training program that's commonly referred across the country as Smoke School. And Smoke School provides, it's 2 parts. There's a training or a classroom portion that provides instruction on visible emission theory, observation procedures, and documentation requirements. And then after completing that training portion, observers then have to pass a visual field test where they estimate opacities of a series of smoke plumes that are generated by a calibrated smoke generator. And then those estimates have to fall within the accuracy limits that are specified within the test method in order for that observer to obtain certification. Once certification is obtained, it's valid for 6 months, after which they have to repeat that visual field test and recertify every 6 months to maintain certification. So in California, the California Air Resources Board has historically played a crucial role in providing that smoke school training and certification for district staff and staff at regulated sources. And for many years, CARB offered smoke school at numerous locations throughout the state, throughout the year, including coming here to each of our district's 3 regions twice a year to recertify our staff. In recent years, however, cuts to CARB's training budget have significantly reduced the number of locations where they offer smoke school statewide. And since 2019, our district staff based here out of the Fresno office have been having to travel to Bakersfield every 6 months. And similarly, our Modesto staff have been traveling to Sacramento every 6 months to maintain those certifications, and industry staff as well have felt those impacts. So that leads us to the limitation in our current Rule 4101, which defines an observer for Method 9 purposes as a human observer that's certified and trained by the California Air Resources Board. And the specific reference to CARB was not always part of that definition. It was added the last time Rule 4101 was amended back in 2005. And at the time, the rule was being amended for unrelated purposes, but we received a comment from CARB during that rulemaking asking us to make our definition of an observer a little bit more specific, to really get into, how observers are required to be trained and certified. Well, at that time, CARB was the only recognized provider of smoke school training that was operating in California. And so we updated our definition to just mention them by name, trained and certified by the Air Resources Board. So fast forward to today, and there's new technologies that have begun to emerge. In August of 2023, the US EPA approved an alternative method that they're calling Alt 152A, which was proposed by a company called Virtual Smoke School LLC. And this alternative certifies observers for Method 9 using a virtual reality headset instead of the traditional in-person smoke school. In the process of getting this approved by EPA, testing was conducted to demonstrate that the observers that were certified using this virtual reality technology were capable of reading opacity just as accurately as observers that were certified through a traditional smoke school. And Method 9, or excuse me, this alternative does provide some benefits. It makes smoke school and Method 9 more readily available by allowing it to be completed anywhere, anytime. We're not limited to those dates and locations where it's being offered by CARB. And it also eliminates some of the other challenges that were associated with traditional smoke school, like the travel and also inclement weather. So the reasons for the proposed amendments to Rule 4101, as stated, our current definition of observer requires that observers be trained and certified exclusively by CARB. And The purpose of that definition really was to ensure that observers are completing a proper training and certification process that satisfies the requirements of Method 9, but not to restrict observers to a single training provider. That language and the reference to CARB in the current definition really was a reflection of what was available at the time when it was written. So an amendment to the rule language is necessary in order to allow the use of alternative certification options that are approved by EPA, such as Alt 152A, which has the potential to save the district significant time and resources. So to summarize the proposed amendments, it's really just to redefine what an observer is, which the proposed definition is a qualified human observer certified and trained in accordance with the procedures in EPA Method 9 or other alternative methods approved by EPA and the APCO. So this new definition would allow more flexibility to both the district and to industry to utilize other options besides CARB to certify staff, while still upholding that training and certification must meet the standards that are set forth in Method 9 or an approved alternative method. There was one other definition that was added. This one is less substantive, but really more just as a clarification. We defined EPA as the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So I mentioned the benefits to the district and also regulated sources. This will add greater flexibility to pursue more cost-effective training and certification options. Looking internally, by implementing Alt 152A, the virtual reality smoke school here with our district staff, there'd be a relatively low initial cost to obtain the equipment, but then substantial opportunity for savings once we have that. So estimated staff time alone, we'd be looking at 500 hours annually savings on travel and then the time actually taken to certify staff. In addition to those other related travel costs, gas, per diems for staff, electric charging, wear and tear, all of that. And it also reduces the potential impacts to district services by no longer would we have all of our staff traveling, out of district for a day to recertify, which has the potential to impact our responsiveness to public complaints and other things that may come in. By having the flexibility, we can stagger training so that not all of our staff are out of the field at any given time. And this doesn't obligate anyone to use this technology. It still leaves the option to attend traditional CARB smoke school if desired. And through our public process, we engaged the public on these rule amendments and also presented these to our Citizens Advisory Committee, which a consensus of that committee is supportive of the proposed changes. So the recommendations before you this morning are to approve the proposed amendments to Rule 4101, to update the definition of an observer and allow the use of approved alternative certification options, and to authorize the chair to sign the resolution. That completes my presentation and we'll take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Jason on this? Yes, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, Jason. I think I understand when you say opacity is the transmission of light. So that, when it's done at smoke school, someone has to observe that physically there. Whereas in this virtual reality deal, you're able to see that opacity as well and just get certified because you're able to see that. And therefore, when you go and observe an operation, you're able to detect whether or not based on that opacity. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, so the virtual reality process, it shows videos of actual smoke plumes generated at an in-person event. So you're seeing the same thing and evaluating the same smoke plumes, just not with it being there physically in person in front of you.
Yeah, so that's just to get certified, but if you're at an operation and you're viewing it and observing it and you see that, I mean, you still have to call it for what it is, not necessarily, right? So the certification is the amendment that we're doing here.
Right,
Okay,
right.
Good. Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dr. Sheriffs.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I just observe the details of what our staff do and go through. You know, this is a great reminder. And a reminder, you know, 500 hours of staff, that's a significant chunk of time. There's a huge benefit, as you pointed out, to the district in terms of the quality of our work, to the regulated community, having confidence in being what's done. You know, the detail's really important. And I just admire the adaptability without loss of rigor, and continuing to pay attention to the cost balance. So well done. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that it's really amazing the 21st century technology that we were able to move into to allow our staff to take advantage of this training without having to travel hundreds of miles or the impact on the budget for vehicles, gas and such, to do it right in the workplace or wherever the designation is going to be. So I think as we move forward in our society, more of this type of technology will be developed to help our staff out, to make the training that they need to get much easier. So job well done. Thank you.
I see no more board questions. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you. Modesto, do you have any public comments for this item?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Bakersfield, do you have any public comments?
No public comments in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno? I do have one commenter coming up.
Farmers League, any member of the CAC. It's a great benefit for the district, but it's a tremendous benefit for the industry. As one of our members of the CAC talked about, who is very knowledgeable, probably one of the geniuses. But it's a great opportunity because now the industries don't have to do the same thing, don't have to travel and figure out how to get there, because many of our businesses do have to deal with opacity. And it just gives that great opportunity, and that EPA is really the mover. But it was presented by the ARB staff at the CAC this last month, and there was a tremendous amount of support for this. But again, I want to thank the staff for also moving in that direction and allowing that to be part of that. And but it will be a great benefit for the industry. So I hope that the board moves forward in approving the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel.
We do have an online comment. Christian Bisher.
Hi, Christian.
Hi, good morning. Christian Bisher, live in Fresno, work for Central California Environmental Justice Network. At CCEJN, we operate 3 different IVIN identifying violations affecting neighborhoods networks in Kern, Tulare, and Fresno counties. The opacity complaints that we submit on behalf of residents, knowing that travel is required, it's difficult getting the inspector out there in time. And so now knowing they can get trained using virtual methods, I think my next question would be for future work, can virtual, I guess, digital methods be used to address those complaints? So could that resident take pictures or video with a camera that would meet the digital resolution needed from those different angles? Because we can train residents on knowing where the sun is and where to take those angles from. And then not only does the inspector not have to get out there, but it allows that timely recording of the emissions that the resident is seeing. Since we don't know how long it takes the inspector to get out there, and then if it's done, nothing can be done. But I would just like to add future efforts towards the enforcement using digital media methods. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your comments.
No further comments.
Okay, seeing no further comments, this is an action item, so I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor McCauley and a tie for a second. Councilmember Rodriguez, we'll go with you, sir. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chiesa,
Aye.
Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Iscutia Brayton,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez.
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
I vote aye.
Mr. Rickman,
I vote yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
I vote aye.
Dr. Sheriffs,
A tie-breaking aye.
Ms. Nguyen,
Yes.
Ms. Schicklin.
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
All right. Aye. All right. Our next item is to receive an update on agricultural burning phase-out strategy and approve emergency measures to extend ag burning alternatives grant program through the remainder of the 25-26 fiscal year. Good morning, gentlemen.
All right, good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science, joined by Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives, and we'll give you this update on where we are with the ag burn phase out and the grant program and some proposed changes. So a little bit of background here and history on this. So Senate Bill 705 was established back in 2003, which required the phase out of agricultural burning, specifically in the San Joaquin Valley only, not anywhere outside of the valley, but it was a valley specific state legislation that required the phase out of ag burning throughout the region. And in 2005, we made updates to our Rule 4103 to start the implementation of the phase out and enforce this phase out. And since 2005, when we updated Rule 4103, we've been progressively phasing out agricultural burning throughout the region for different crop categories, various different commodities. So this has been a slow progression over this last 20 years or so to phase out ag burning throughout the region. And the final phase out just happened over the last few years. And I'll give a few more details on that. But throughout this entire process over this last 20 years of this phase out, your board has prioritized us to continue to look at alternatives, new technology to see what else could be done besides open burning. And you were a big supporter of the final phase out strategy that was put together in June of 2021. Your board approved of this. And this really focused on just the last few remaining categories that were not phased out yet due to different economic or technological reasons. But with the development of technology, it was now possible to phase out these last few remaining crop categories over the last few years. And this was built on other phase outs that had happened before this June 2021 action. So we're building upon the progress we were making. And this required that phase out be in place by January 1st, 2025. So now we're a little over a year past that date. So we're seeing the effects of the full phase out at this point now. And this was set up to maximize the reduction of tonnage of material being open burned, looking at different alternatives, and also giving the smallest ag operations the most time to adjust to the phase out process. So the largest ag operations had to comply with the first, the smaller ag operations were given more time up to that January 1st, 2025 deadline. Financial incentives was also a huge part of that action in June 2021 to make sure we had the incentives in place to help offset some of the costs for growers to take advantage of these alternatives. And as of now, we're continuing to implement and enforce this phase out strategy. And throughout this process of setting up this final phase out over the past few years, there's extensive amount of outreach to Valley Ag growers and commodity groups and getting their support and helping educate on what this process was, as well as the incentive program to let them know that those resources were available. So a little bit of detail here on what it's been looking like over the past few years. The graphic on the right-hand side shows the progression of how ag burning has been reduced over the past 5 years. So just going back in time, historically, we used to have over 1 million tons of ag material being open burned
throughout the region each year. In 2021, when we first started to implement that final phase out, we were at about 480,000 tons. Because of the phase out up to that point, we saw big reductions. Then in 2022 and 23, we saw further reductions, 125,000, 122,000. 2024 was another record low for us at 98,000 tons of material being open burned. The year 2025 last year, that was the first full year of the phase out being in place. And we saw about 39,000 tons being open burned. And so you can see the progression of just the last few years, how much has changed here. And to support this progress, we also have a very successful grant program that Todd will talk a bit more about in a few minutes. And the grant program helps through different alternatives to process between 1.2 and 1.9 million tons of ag material annually throughout this time period. And we expect open ag burning to continue to be at the low levels that we've seen here in 2025 going forward. So a little more detail here. We've shown this a number of times, but this is now updated. So if we go all the way back in time on the left-hand side of this chart, this shows the tonnage of material being open burned annually each year. So back in the early 2000s, you can see we had roughly over 1 million tons of ag material being open burned. Then SB 705 was established in 2003. That's kind of at that peak year there on the left-hand side. In 2005, we updated our open burn rule to implement this phase out and starting to see some progression of reductions. You can see in 2006, 2007, you're seeing this coming down as the phase out is being implemented. And then you start to see this come up again in 2013, 14, and 15. If you remember, these years here were historic drought years for California, very dry, some of the worst drought years we've ever seen. So orchards and vineyards are being pulled out at record paces. And at the same time, a lot of our biomass facilities that used to handle a lot of this material were closing down for different economic reasons. So it created this condition where you see now that line coming up in 2014, 15, 16, where more is being open burned. In 2019, so if you look at that blue box there, in 2019, that's when we launched our grant program for alternatives. So you start to see that coming down. And then in 2021, this is when our final phase out strategy came into place. And you can see just after that, in the early 2020s, our numbers really dropped rapidly. And we hit that record low there in 2025. And that year 2026, that is year to date. So we're still seeing that change throughout this year. Then on the far right-hand side, this is our grant program activity. So this is the amount of ag woody waste going through our grant program. So on 2019, and on the left-hand side, that's when the program first started. You can see this continually ramping up as it became more popular, as more people were taking advantage of it. And it got over 1.8 million tons of ag woody waste being processed through this alternatives program. And that's been a huge success in helping us see that left-hand side there of the reduction in ag burning. And at this point, I'm going to pass it to Todd to give a little more background on the history of our grant program and some proposed changes.
Thank you, John. So in recognition of the need to develop these new alternatives and to support the final phase out strategy, back in 2018, your board authorized the Ag Burn Alternatives Grant Program. It was started somewhat as a pilot program to see if this could work and to develop these new alternatives and to really think outside the box and come up with a strategy that could assist the district and the agricultural community in really reducing their open burning. This consisted of financial incentives to growers to implement these alternative strategies. Primarily, it's chipping and it's soil reincorporation, land application of that material, and more recently, the implementation of air curtain burners in specific situations to deal with disease materials and wire embedded vineyard material. So those air curtain burners are now allowed in certain situations. And then what we call offsite beneficial reuse, and I can talk about that a little bit more later, but this includes other methods of distributing this material that is of beneficial use throughout the valley. It started with over $39 million in local funding to support these emerging alternatives. This is a district-grown program. And in recognition of the success of the program and through some very strong advocacy from Samir and others here at the district, In August of 2021, the state came through with just over $178 million in state funding to support this program. It also included some support for increasing the amount of chipping and shredding equipment that was available. There was recognition that we had to support the industry in these early years to get, to make sure that we had enough equipment out there that could handle this new work that was coming. Throughout the years, we've worked, and in April of 2024, our district worked with CARB to get this program included in the Community Air Protection Program guidelines as another potential funding source for the program. All along, since 2018, your board has been very, very consistent in the fact that we need to support the smaller growers. They have an inordinate impact, that their costs are higher based on, they have smaller farms and it costs more to mobilize to get out to some of these smaller areas. So there's always been this recognition by your board that we need to support those smaller farmers in this transition. To date, more than $250 million in grants have been provided. That's a combination of all the state funding and all the local funding that's been directed to this program. That's coupled with more than $280 million in support from the ag community. So none of our grant programs, or very few of our grant programs, pay 100% of the cost of anything. And so there's this buy-in from the agricultural community, and it's very substantial, representing a total investment of more than $530 million in this program. So we launched the program after we got the new state funding back in August of 2021. In September of 2021, we launched the new program utilizing this newly available state funding. Again, there was an additional program focus on assisting small growers, and I have a slide that kind of goes through what that is. It's been critical in supporting these transitions, this program. Increasing the availability of chipping equipment, like I said, and then reducing the significant cost of some of these new alternatives that are being developed. Since inception, we have supported more than 330,000 acres of orchard and vineyard removals throughout the valley. This represents almost 9 million tons of agricultural material that was no longer being burned, that was being used for these alternative destruction methods. And there's substantial emission reductions that go along with that. More than 17,000 tons of NOx, almost 32,000 tons of PM, and 27,000 tons of VOCs have been reduced through this program. So this graphic just basically shows by crop type the participation rates throughout the valley. As you can see, almonds, are far and away the leader. However, in the recent maybe year or slightly more, we've seen a significant increase in vineyard removals. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that number has come up quite significantly and is leading to some of the projections for funding that we're now seeing. So, but historically, it's been almonds and grapes that have really sort of driven this program. And as I mentioned, your board has always been very, very adamant that we direct and dedicate funding to those smallest of growers for those reasons that I outlined earlier. And in September of 2020, your board directed that a minimum of 30% of the available funding be set aside for what we're calling the small agricultural operations. At the time, it was defined as 500 acres or less in size. We increased incentives a couple of years later for some categories for growers that are less than or equal to 100 acres in size. So even the smallest of growers is what we're calling those. And we've been very successful in directing that funding to those smaller growers. Since that time, 56% of the projects and 39% of the funding have been provided to growers that are 500 acres or less. So that includes the 500 and the 100 acre farms. So where are we now? Where are we today? The phase out strategy and the alternatives grant program are working very, very effectively. The new alternatives have emerged. They're being implemented on a regular basis, and the program is really robust at this point. Unfortunately, the current funding expenditure rate is higher than we've expected. This is due to a variety of reasons, including Sigma. We have some drought considerations and other market pressures. We've seen a drastic increase in vineyard removals over the last year that have led to a higher utilization of the incentive program. And in speaking with industry, we're very much engaged with industry, and we're expecting that that demand to remain high for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, what that is leading to is a quicker exhaust sort of timeline where the program is forecasted to essentially run out of money. We're forecasting mid to late April, which is basically now. In fact, I checked in with my team this morning, and we've got about $300,000 left in the program at this point, which based on our current expenditure rate is not going to get us more than the next few days in terms of funding availability. So at that point, we would need to stop accepting new applications. And so what we have done to stave off that measure of having to stop accepting these applications, we're proposing a couple of emergency measures that we're going to discuss with you today that will ensure the continuity of the program and availability of funding throughout the remainder of this fiscal year. So the first of those proposed emergency measures is lowering incentive amounts across all of the categories. And as we were developing these changes and as we were floating these ideas, this was done in very, very close consultation and coordination with Valley Ag stakeholders. We've discussed our plan with CARB, and we even took this item to the district's Citizens Advisory Committee, and they're in full support of what we're proposing today. It's adjustments to incentive amounts, and then it's the allocation of additional incentive funding. I'll go through both of those on the next couple of slides. Again, we're proposing at this point to lower the incentive amounts for all categories under the program, and we have a couple of reasons for doing this. The first and foremost is obvious. It stretches the available funding, and it will get us to the end of this fiscal year until the new budget year kicks in and we have additional funding for the program. It also provides a more consistent cost share across all crop types, and I'll explain what that means. When I say consistent cost share, that's the district's incentive level, so what the district pays per project. Right now, what we're seeing is a slightly higher, about 10% higher incentive going towards vineyards than orchards. So there's those two main categories, vineyards and orchards. Right now, we're seeing that on average, vineyards are receiving a higher percentage of their costs getting paid for under the program. And what we wanted to do with these changes is bring that more into parity, where vineyards and orchards are receiving a very similar percentage of funding. And we've been able to accomplish that with what we're proposing today. Strategically lowering these incentive amounts will bring parity between 30 and 55% average district cost share moving forward. It varies by farm size, and I'll show over the next couple of slides what we're proposing in terms of continuing to provide higher incentive amounts for those smallest of agricultural operations. So here are our current funding levels. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but as you can see, small and large growers, so anything over 100 acres, they're sort of lumped into one category at this point. And then what we're calling the smallest, for lack of a better term, the smallest growers are receiving a higher incentive. And so this next slide is what we are proposing. As you can see, we've now broken out small and large. So 101 to 500 acres is what we're considering small farms. Those large growers are anything over 500, and then those smallest growers are less than or equal to 100 acres in size. And as you can see, the smallest growers are getting the highest incentive, and then it kind of ratchets down from there as we move up to the larger growers. I do need to point out that there was a typo in the board item memo on this table. For the small growers, 101 to 500 acres under the soil incorporation, so just below that middle blue line, Those are the correct figures in the board item memo. They were both at 500, just for full disclosure. All of the calculations were done on the correct figures. This was just a copy and paste error, and I just wanted to point that out in case there was a discrepancy that you noticed. So again, we've seen a substantial increase in program participation, particularly in those vineyard removals. You've all heard of, what wineries and what vineyard growers are going through right now. They're forecasting, thousands of additional acres of removal this coming year. And so that demand is projected to remain high. Again, it's leading to that shortfall that we're talking about for the remainder of this fiscal year. Absent additional funding, again, we would have to shut the program down in the next couple of days. To ensure that doesn't happen, we've identified $8 million in potential local funding to support the program, and this is broken out into two different categories. The first is we're proposing to allocate $4 million in available community incentive funds, shifting those from our reserve into the 2025 non-operating budget and making those available for the program. The second category is we're proposing to reallocate an additional $4 million in existing funding from our fireplace and wood stove replacement program. With this transfer, we're confident that sufficient funding remains in that program to accommodate the program need for the remainder of this fiscal year. And just to give you a little bit more context, in that program, we have about $12 million identified in this year's spending plan for that program. To date, we've spent about $5.6 million, and we're forecasting another $1 to $2 million being necessary for the remainder of this fiscal year. The program slows down slightly as the weather gets warmer and fewer people are thinking about their fireplaces in the summertime and in the late spring when it gets warm. So there is a slight slowdown in that program. So we're forecasting that with this shift, the remaining funding will be sufficient to accommodate the need in that program for the remainder of the fiscal year. So all of these proposed actions, the reduction in incentive amounts coupled with the additional infusion of funding, we're very confident that this will help get us to the finish line, get us to June of 2026 until the next fiscal year kicks in. So we are continuing, and we have been very, very aggressively advocating for additional funds for this program. We're working with a broad coalition of Valley and other stakeholders to ensure that our funding priorities and the funding priorities of the Valley are communicated and supported throughout the legislative process. We have an official request of $75 million annually statewide for this program to sustain implementation of the phase out of open ag burning, not just here in the Valley, but statewide. This funding, if it was received, would support the processing of over 2 million tons of material annually and would achieve approximately 20,000 tons of additional emission reductions over the next 5 years. We've been working with elected officials in the legislature. We've submitted requests. They have submitted requests for the 2026-27 budget. Without timely state legislative budget action, California risks losing these critical air quality gains, the imposition of unreasonable burdens on the agricultural industry, and really impeding the state's environmental policy goals. So what's next? If these programmatic changes are approved today, we are prepared to immediately update the program materials, our website language, all of our outreach materials. We would work closely with our agricultural stakeholder groups to inform them of the changes. We've been working with them closely, so they're understanding that this is what's being proposed today. We'll continue our aggressive advocacy at the state level to work with ag stakeholders and Valley Legislative Delegation to continue to pursue the substantial and sustained program funding. I should note that the governor's budget at this time does not include funding for the program. And so we are continuing to push forward. Hopefully we'll see some changes in the governor's May revised budget. And so we're going to actively pursue that funding over the next several weeks is kind of the critical time for that. But in the absence of continued significant state funding, These reduction in incentive levels may have to become permanent. If it can't be sustained, if we don't get significant additional funding, we may have to look at making these changes permanent. Right now, they're being proposed as emergency temporary measures, but we'll revisit those measures specifically in June as we get a better picture of what the state budget is going to look like. We'll come back to your board and make a decision. You know, if there's a signal that additional funding will make it into the budget, you know, we'll look at that as that budget picture becomes more clear in June. So with that, the recommendations are before you here. I'm not going to read them. They're also in your packet. But that concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
So through the chair, closing comment.
Yes.
Yeah, on that last note from Todd, great job, John and Todd, in laying this very complex topic out in a concise way. The June discussion, I think, is going to be an important one also because, and by permanent, we mean permanent from that point moving forward until another point in time that we review this again, and nothing's ever really permanent in that sense. But I think in June, we would have a good sense of where we are on a couple of fronts, assuming the board moves forward with recommendations today. By June, we would have a good sense of where we are with the state budget. We'd have a good sense of where some of the ongoing transitions are. And then at that point, we would also be thinking to next year's incentive spending plan and using those learnings, you know, basically be able to reach conclusions around, you know, are we at the right incentive levels at this lower level? Do we want to make any other changes even at that time? And then put that in place basically for, you know, for at least that next phase as we continue to review this over time. So I just want to add a little bit more color to, you know, pretty much every year the board has taken a look at this and in some ways has made adjustments as this transition has happened. And that will continue to happen over time as we keep learning more. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Supervisor McCauley?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple questions. So the variance on the processing year over year, is that driven by funding or lack thereof? Like I noticed 25 is kind of a down year relative to 23, 24.
Oh, I can take that question, but Todd, correct me if I or add to this. You're talking about the amount of material
Correct,
in that
that we
chart?
processed.
Yeah, that's really got more to do with the types of removals that come into the program. And so just to give you a quick example of how that can vary significantly, when you remove an orchard, you're talking about probably about 30 tons or so of wood per acre of material in a typical average orchard removal. Whereas when you remove a vineyard, that's about 15 tons per acre, about half the amount of woody material on the same sort of acre. And so what we've seen, as Todd alluded to earlier, is a real shift towards more vineyard removals coming into the program. And so the amount of funding demand has actually increased because the cost of handling a vineyard removal is actually higher than the average cost of removing an orchard, but the actual amount of wood that's being addressed is less. And so the amount of funding demand, the amount of applications that have come in have only gone up, but the actual amount of wood being handled on a relative basis is actually lesser. And so it's not really a function of, so it's mainly a function of the types of projects that come in.
Sure.
Yeah.
That does kind of lead me to, yeah, our regulatory timeline. I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. As far as funding demand though, do we have projections on future demand on what is going to be needed over the next 5 years? Because I know we have a 5-year request for 75 per year. And then also, do we have an understanding, and I think we all kind of do, but of the impacts of doing nothing, whether that's fire, pest, blight, whatever that may be? I'm just kind of getting at, like, with our funding request, you know, how deep are we going with this? Or are we helping the legislator understand, like, again, what our 5-year projections are and the impacts of doing nothing around this?
Through the chair, yeah. So I think we have a better sense of, say, over the next year to 2 years, and that is based on the feedback that we've heard about things like vineyard removals and some of the other transitions. I think the Sigma implementation is the other one with the fallowing that's going on. We're getting a better sense of that. I think what we've also seen is a pretty steady amount of demand over the past 6 years, 5 to 6 years, where we have seen the 180 million that we originally received. It's been in the 40 to 50 million per year range consistently now for a number of years, and we don't see any reason for that to slow down. The mix will vary over time due to a variety of factors, many of which we can't actually predict because it has a lot to do with international markets, commodity pricing, even the war is in some ways now impacting decisions that are being made about which crops are more favorable, how much transition should happen. So we are trying to get a better sense of that. But one thing we do know for sure is that this transition will happen in a heavy way for at least a few more years. And the cost will be significant as the longer that we're able to basically sustain these alternatives and make sure that that emerging market is a stable one where there are services available to everybody. And it just becomes really the norm at every level, at every crop commodity, at every farm size. In some way, I think that's the goal here is that, we're just a year out from the final date under this transition. We need at least several years to, in our opinion, to stabilize that. And then at that point, hopefully there's a little bit more stability down the line where we don't see quite as much acreage being pulled. But that really is hard to forecast, beyond a year or two.
Yeah, I think my crystal ball kind of says that this demand for this program is going to be steady, if not increasing over the coming years. So it seems like this is a time where we need to double down on these efforts as opposed to pulling back. And which kind of leads me to my next comment, which is, this board is responsible for, putting in these regulations that, prevent ag burning. So I think this board also has a responsibility to step up and advocate for this funding. So I would love to see ongoing discussions after this meeting, after the amendments to this program, around how counties and cities can support this ask, because I think it is, up to us essentially to make sure that, we are heard in the Valley, that we do support, our farmers. And lastly, I would just encourage staff to, work with our local GSAs to ensure that, we have proper alignment with those funding opportunities as well as our funding opportunities here at the Air District. I think that's going to make a heck of a difference when approaching the legislator around these asks. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this. And I will say, as a non-elected, I also ascribe to that responsibility of making sure that this is a success. And I will say that, I do think for some context also, there have been hundreds of hours put in just to make sure there was the technology pushing forward, bringing technology from abroad to ensure that this phase out was plausible. And so, well, not everybody has had that front row seat. It has taken a lot of work on everybody's side, ag side for sure, and to make this a reality and make this sustainable. And so we are, I'm not, trying to be alarmist or anything, but it is a very critical moment right now. There is no like next month. It's this week is when we need to be pushing for more funding, right? And there is a commitment that was made around that, and I do think that it is important to state that out loud and to say that on my end, I fully intend to remind everyone of that commitment that was made. And why do I do that as a public health person? Because there is an immediate benefit to this working, right? And so I have every interest in making sure that this is a success. There is no political win to seeing this fail. Only public health loses when this fails. So this is a really critical moment, and my full support on this, as well as the need to really put this on the top part of everyone's file to ensure the funding is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Chiesa.
Thanks, Chair. And I agree with both of my colleagues. As a elected person on a public health agency, as well as a farmer, this was the least popular decision amongst my farming family that I had to make, but the numbers prove that it was the right decision. But the reason this ultimately was successful was because of money. The subsidy trying to build capacity and to subsidize the folks to reincorporate, because I have utilized this program one time and it is more expensive to reincorporate than to send to a cogeneration plant, without a doubt. And I know that there's fewer and fewer cogeneration plants, but it's a difficult thing. It's not easy to do, to reincorporate. But again, ultimately, it's the right thing if we can get the funding. If we don't get the funding, and I would be the alarmist. I appreciate Dr. Pacheco Warner's comments, but I would become an alarmist and I would take a look at this program. I would bring it back and have a discussion about it. Otherwise, if there's no funding, because it will put people in a bad situation between this and Sigma, especially in the South Valley. So I'm completely behind what we're doing here today. I just want everyone to be aware from the farm community. And the other question, there was one question we were talking about here, was the curtain burners. Are there restrictions on curtain burners?
Through the chair, yeah, I can clarify that. There are, so there is an incentive option available for certain materials, as was mentioned earlier, for certain vineyard removals as well as disease. There's a registration program that air curtain burners have to, the board did take action as one of the many things that the board did as part of the phase out. There was an ability to register the air curtain burner. It's subject to certain requirements, including opacity and other emissions requirements. So there's a regulatory structure for the air curtain burners, which they operate under, and then there's a funding ability for certain types of removals that they are able to be used for.
Thank you for the clarification. That's all, Chair.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I want to thank my colleagues for all their comments, especially Member Chiesa, that's from the farming community. Appreciate those comments. So kind of what we went through with the tractor program that we just were all part of, right? I think some of us had an exciting feeling of being there and crushing that. How does that work with when it comes to ag burning? Is it also something that we as a district have to be there to see the accountability of how that process is done? Meaning, if I'm going to take out these acreage, then I have to see that it's either mulched, it's put into some type of device that's going to eliminate the reductions. How does that happen? If you don't mind me asking.
Of course, great question, through the chair. We will go out and physically inspect these sites in multiple occasions during the process. When a grower applies to us, they'll provide us with a site map. They'll provide us with the acreage that they're proposing to chip and reincorporate, or use an alternative strategy. We will go out, we'll send our inspectors out to physically verify that material exists and hasn't already been chipped and is not already gone and hasn't disappeared already. And then so all of that's done prior to issuing a voucher. And then on the back end, once they notify us that the activity is complete, we will go out and we will reinspect, either to make sure it's been spread on the surface, or if it's been reincorporated. In cases where we use an alternative strategy, an alternative method, what we're calling the beneficial reuse, we will verify that has occurred. And when I say beneficial reuse, I'm talking about things like using it for dust suppression along highways and other areas like that, roadways and things. We will go out and we'll actually physically inspect it to make sure they're doing what they say they're going to do with that material. And that's all backed up with documentation as well. We have, receipts and hauling, all of those things that are necessary to sort of put that full picture together and ensure that what we think is happening is actually happening out in the field.
Thank you, Todd. And that's a good point, because I want to make sure that when we talk about this, the transparency behind the accountability, which is a great, I think we all experienced what took place at the Bruno's place there, is we actually get to see that this is taking place. Now, again, I know there's $4 million coming out of the wood stove and transferring this over. So the power of AI helps me understand and quantifies for me what that equates to as far as tonnage in NOx emissions, right? And there's no comparison that the ag burning, certainly 30 times more. So if we're going to, and one thing that being part of this public health agency is I like to know where our money is being invested in. And the investment is for the cleaner air, right? So this certainly brings out a huge amount of relief when it comes to air quality. And again, breaking it down 30 times more when it comes for the money invested. So I just wanted to say that, yes, I think this is a great move. I hope that we can continue the funding to work in partnership with a lot of our farming and ag community. But again, making sure that the accountability piece is there. We import so much plastic from other countries because of our consumption. Why can't we export wood, in this case, fire burning to others? Is that not something that's I'm not trying to create issues for other areas, but I mean, there are other areas that are in dire need of some type of wood burning material. And would this not be some viable solution to other parts of the world?
Through the chair, and I think that's a great, just on the last point, and also the great factoid that helps us all understand it as well. Appreciate that comment. But yeah, on that last point, we have actually seen over time some emerging markets, and including even under the beneficial reuse, some reuse of that material as an actual product to, like, for playgrounds and things like that. There's actually, and actually exporting it and using it in different ways. So I think that market continues to emerge over time. And I think that's something that we've definitely been keeping an eye on and trying to support as part of this phase out, is like, how do we, what all-in approach basically on ways, non-burning ways of using, that material. So definitely want to validate that that's something that we've been supportive of for sure.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. The burning is obviously so important from a health standpoint, because it's not just PM 2.5, but it's primary PM 2.5, which is, from a health standpoint, the very worst. I'm certainly in favor of these measures as a way to, we need a orderly end to ag burning, not a disorderly approach. My question, can you talk a little more about the exceptions that are in the graph on page 5, I guess it is, where woody waste is in fact burned?
Through the chair, yeah, I can just a quick response on that. And they're kind of, it's the slurs are so small that they're very difficult to see here.
Yes, and I realize it's a really small piece of the big
but
picture.
those would be primary.
I don't want to focus on
right.
small, but
those would primarily be what's known as attrition burning and then diseased material burning. And so attrition burning would be more the incidental, like the very small scale. If a strong wind were to come through and there was a few a blown over tree, or where in those cases, and those are actually outside of the phase out even, but where it's just a lot more difficult to say bring in like a contractor to handle just a very small incidental amount. Essentially, that's what attrition is.
Understood. So clarifying, those are the small piles of woody material that I see when I am out walking in the countryside, and I go back 2 weeks later and I see
possibly, yes. I think that there is a significant portion of that I don't think would qualify under attrition burning. If it was, again, it would be an enforcement situation if somebody, for example, were to have pruning piles and then were to burn them, because prunings, for example, have been phased out for some time. But again, it would be more of the incidental and a much smaller scale relative to what might have been some of those in the past. So definitely, let's if you see things that appear to fall in other categories, that's something we should be talking about, because that's why we have the enforcement side of this as well. Those have been phased out. Yeah, but basically between disease and that explains the bulk of that remaining, the little amount that's left there.
Okay, Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, I want to thank Supervisor Chiesa. I'm the other farmer on this board, but I really appreciate his comments because they're very articulate. And, but I just want to bring up a couple of things. One is some of these crops cycle. Okay, you got almonds, it's always gonna be on the top of the list because the almonds only last somewhere between, 20 and 30 years at the most. Okay, so there's always almonds coming out, always. Pistachios are probably on the other end of that spectrum, but the problem is some of the older pistachios are probably planted before 1990. Those varieties aren't very high producing compared to the ones today. So I'm sure there's guys taking them out, so that's there. But I don't know if we can get information from the Farm Service Agency because on everybody's 578, you have to have the year that you planted those trees, and that stays on that paperwork going through. So if we get some kind of, information on what's probably going to be cycling out, so that's just a baseline. Now, I think this isn't going to go away. It's going to get worse. It's going to get to the point where even 75 million isn't enough, because we really haven't seen the effects of Sigma. Okay. And it's going to be catastrophic especially from Madera through Kern County. And that's going to happen more between 2030 and 2040. So that's, we're just touching, we only can see the iceberg that's above the water. Okay. The iceberg's way bigger underneath. So it's going to get worse. So we have to stay with our gas foot on the pedal for the ask, and I've got one other, this is a question. It's a theoretical question. I don't want to, not even interested in doing it, but since January, how many days do you think you could have actually burned? Because people get all confused. They think these ag burns are all the time. They're not. You have to get a permit. You have to tell them, yeah, you could burn. This is before we changed the rules. But do you have any kind of idea?
I don't have an exact number in my mind, but you're right. During the winter season, when we have residential wood burning restrictions, ag burning is often restricted along with that.
Right.
And during the summer season, when it's really warm, a lot of high pressure,
Yeah,
the dispersion isn't good. It's difficult to find those times. So
Right.
it's these smaller windows like in the spring or the fall where most of it happens. Yeah.
But sometimes, even in the wintertime, because I'd get, people would call me, hey, I got a permit to burn and they're not letting me burn. Well, I said, atmospheric conditions aren't right for you to burn. If you get on the list, eventually you'll get on the list where you can burn when the atmosphere is correct to do it. That's usually right before rain and, or actually during a rain, you're supposed to burn that, but I just, people need to know that. I think there was a lot of misconceptions on how that program even worked at the end. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, my approach is very simplistic, and I really appreciate Supervisors Chiesa and Mendez for their professional input on this because they are farmers. It brings a different perspective. But when I look back at page 6, where in August of 21, I believe that the 178 million plus, that was to our district. And that was kind of at the, the fledgling at the onset of what this program was intended to do. And moving forward with the $75 million request for 5 years, that's statewide, which is really a teeny weeny piece of money compared to what we were getting before. So my question is, are other air districts that have agriculture, are they working with us to approach the state about at least this 75 million, or keeping this program going, or trying to get more money put back into the program so that the air districts throughout the state of California can handle what the state has requested us to do?
Through the chair, yeah, just a quick response to that. We do have support from some partnering area districts that also have agricultural sectors. So for example, the Sacramento area basin, Yolo County, Sacramento County, they do allow open burning there. They but are also interested in trying to replicate some of the success that we've had here by just through an incentive-based approach, perhaps, since they don't have a regulatory, I'm not sure there's any regulatory interests in other parts of the state. We're unique in that sense, but I think it's also where the challenge also lies in that for us, it's a major issue because we want to continue to support this full strategy that we have in place that includes a regulatory component. For other areas, I think they're more interested as a means of continuing to sort of start catching up maybe to where we've been as a region. So I think we're definitely leading the charge on this right now. And I just wanted to use this opportunity as a plug to amplify, what Supervisor McCauley had raised earlier as a critical time, for as much support as possible to show that the Valley is really in need of these funds. We're trying to definitely get more support statewide through the statewide sort of approach on the request, because I think it is important. We're not the only region that has agriculture, and other regions can benefit certainly from the funding. We would, of course, get the lion's share of that funding, would be our expectation. We get, for example, 80% of farmer funding currently. And I think we've seen the program in that 50 to 60 million per year range. So even the 180 million, we originally got it was for a couple of years worth of funding. It wasn't all 1 year. Some of that went to equipment, so the rest of it went into the per year, per acre. So we do feel like, especially in a very difficult budget environment, that that 75 million range, would really go a long way, knowing that there's a bunch of other priorities as well. And I think the statewide approach hopefully gets, broader support beyond the Valley. But at this time, it's game time. And at this time, we're the only region with a mandate. And so we are definitely leading the charge right now and just trying to make sure everybody else can support that as well. And of course, anybody who's interested, on the county side, the city side, or in any other way, we have put in our requests, and we know there's strong support by different entities, whether it's in agriculture or other organizations are actually all looking at this very closely right now, is in their budget advocacy. But I think any extra support would be terrific, beyond the board's representation. But I think anything at the city county level in particular would be very good to get as well. So I just want to support that.
Go ahead.
I was particularly thinking of the Napa-Sonoma area, and I don't know area-wise how much in acreage they have versus what we have, or down in Southern California where we have a lot of the fruit orchards, your orange and grapefruit trees, such as that. And I don't know if those have to come out as often as some of the nut trees that we have here in the Valley. But certainly, I appreciate our staff's effort to try to advocate for what we're asking the state for at this point, and for all of us to let our colleagues know at city and county level to contact your representatives and ask them to help us, as well as the ones that have already been engaged in helping us. Thank you.
There is a draft letter, is that correct? Is there something that can be forwarded to us that then we could share with our respective boards and or councils to send?
Yes, through the chair, absolutely. That's the note that I jotted down, was just sharing the district's letter, which you have received a copy of, but which we can recirculate. But also there's a few other more recent letters that are really kind of focusing in at this phase of the strategy that are really more focused now on kind of where we are today. There's a couple of sample letters that I think would be good for you to look at. One of them, for example, our Citizen Advisory Committee just pulled together, and we'll get a copy of that to the board as well as any other supporting material. So we'll put a little package together so you can take a look at that. And if anybody has questions, of course, they can talk directly to me, and I'm happy to support that.
Thank you. Supervisor Pereira.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make this quick. One, I want to thank you for leaving the incentive amounts for the 100-acre or less farms a little higher. I'm very concerned, and our ag commissioner's concerned, our Farm Bureau, about abandoned orchards due to one, kind of the pressure on the almond price, but more significantly is SGMA. And so anyways, as I was thinking about that, maybe reaching out to public health departments Abandoned orchards are going to increase rodent population significantly. And then so, public health and then also the Ag Commissioner's Office's outreach to get support. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Lloyd. Okay, if there's no more questions that I see, I will bring it back for public comment.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Okay, do we have any members of the public in Fresno? We do have somebody approaching the podium.
Morning, Manuel.
Good morning again.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very, very much. Real fast, first, Supervisor McCulloch, I think your recommendation of getting the Valley supervisors a letter signed by all of them, going to Robert Rivas, the speaker, because all of us, as Samira stated, have met with all the legislators. So it's going to lie with two people. It's going to lie with Robert Rivas with your recommendation upon the supervisors and the recommendation of the cities. I think getting the city cogs together or the city groups, we have 58 cities in this valley. I think it would be great going to Rivas and the governor, and then CCing the chair of the Air Resources Board, Lauren Sanchez, who worked for Gavin Newsom. So that's a great recommendation. I think that's super. Number two, the rodent population is increasing. There is no doubt, as Buddy has testified to that, working with Roger Ison with the Jenners out there on the west side. The rats are huge. These rats carry flamethrowers with them. They meet, they have a union organizer. These rats have got to act together. But it is increasing because I hear about it in the town of Tranquility. I'm hearing about it in the town of Mendota, that rat population has increased. So it's coming into the towns. Dinuba has its own problems, but those rats at that Walmart center came from that exact environment because of what's happening, of abandoned orchards or vineyards. The wine industry has serious problems. We estimate 30,000 acres between now and next year out in this valley. Air curtain burners are used because vineyards have a lot of wire embedded into the cordon. There's also an issue called disease. You cannot chip diseased orchards or vineyards and expect to spread it back onto the farm because we don't have the fumigants anymore. So they've killed that. And if you're going to put a diseased product back onto the farm or grind it, the spores are going to travel to Buddy's field next door or Vito's field down the road. So that's really an important issue. So the air curtain burners are necessary and we have to have those, and they're for the purposes. The trees that fall over are by winds and rains. We have no control, so we can't bring in a chipper to do that. So we have to burn that. But also in the federal law says that if disease is a prevalent issue, that you can burn immediately based upon the Secretary of Agriculture in the United States can override any air regs or anything. That's not our goal. Our goal is to work with Samir and the team and you board. We have a great accomplishment we did as you look at those charts. So we have to hold that. And so we support this 100%. And we got to Congressman Costa and Gray Davis are and have communicated with Robert Rivas and are sending a comment directly to the governor about putting in the 75 million. So they have stepped in as well. Okay. And thank you. We have a USDA partner as well. And Samir and the team is working with NRCS on their funds that they could help us with. So thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, Manuel.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing no more in Fresno, we do have an online commenter, Christian Bisher.
Hi, Christian.
Hi, good morning again. Christian Bisher, live in Fresno. I work with CCEJN. So these comments do not disagree that stopping open burning and using the incentives is beneficial, but I would have just appreciated more information on the effects of the money being moved. And either here or afterwards, I can submit a records request, but I can't figure out what the community incentive fund that the $4 million was being pulled from, like where that money comes from and what it's supposed to be used for. But in March of 25, that fund was decreased by $4.8 million to fund something else. In March of 24, it was decreased by $600,000 to fund something else. And in December 2020, it was decreased by $7 million. So that money's, especially, so in this case, the $4 million is coming out. Like, what would that money have been used for? And what would those emission reductions have been had it not been used? Again, not saying it should have stayed there. It would have been nice to have known so you could compare the differences. For the wood smoke portion, I think I've heard multiple times here that wood smoke typically stays where it was created. Winter weather's cold, we had the inversion layer. So if it's burned in a community, it stays in that community for the most part. So had that $4 million been used on fireplace replacements, just sheer population numbers, the majority would have been in urban, dense population areas. So it's being pulled from there. So those emission reductions would have been affected a lot of people. And now it's happening. The emission reductions are going to occur in farm areas, which would be rural. There'd be less people. And so while the emission reductions may be more on the open burning side, again, just the information, how many people would have been benefited from the emission reductions had the money stayed, and then how many people are now going to be impacted, just so that we can compare the number of people that are positively and negatively impacted. I just think how the people are being impacted would be useful in conversations like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. All right, Supervisor McCauley. Oh,
There's no further comments.
Another
Yeah,
comment.
thank you. Just a quick comment. I wanted to pull back to Dr. Pacheco Warner's comment around time to act is now. And so I would encourage my colleagues to take a look at the letter that is going to be sent to us and work with your council on taking that item up as an item of subsequent need. I'd hate to see us waiting until May when we could get this taken care of in April.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriff.
Yeah, I do have a question. Those last public comments, and thanks to the person who made them. If we are successful in getting state funding, that's 75 million or some significant portion of that, is there a way to replenish the money that we're moving if there are projects that we might want to fund under those? Do we have a mechanism in this, or is it gone?
Yeah, through the chair, I think maybe I can answer that in a way that accommodates a couple of like the same theme, but answer that question, but also a broader question. I think if we are successful in getting once again additional state funds, it'll definitely help make sure that the other funds that we're able to generate, through all the difficult local work can be deployed in other ways. And I think that's to the spirit of the comment that was raised, is that we as you know, we have a broad range of different programs and every budget. So I think now retroactively using a future fund to go back and pay, that might be more difficult. That comes down to the specific terms of the agreement. But I think moving forward, I mean, the short-term piece of this is going to be important just for the next couple of months to keep this effort moving. And then moving ahead, when you think about our new fiscal year and about all the different priorities that the board is going to program all these different funds for, absolutely new state funding would help address this issue, where we can then focus the other funds on all the other variety of things, including residential wood burning and some of the earlier comments that were raised. I just want to clarify too, that we do, as was mentioned by Todd, I think in detail during his presentation, we do think that with this change, that demand that we're getting in our residential wood burning program would be fully addressed in this fiscal year. And then what we would also project in the new budget, the new fiscal year, we want to program enough funding to satisfy what we think that projected demand is. So there isn't a foregone reduction, if you will, in that space. Just want to clarify that in case there was some confusion about that.
Thank you. Okay, this is an action item. So we have a motion by Dr. Pacheco Warner. Second. And a second by Vice Mayor Nguyen.
Mr. Chiesa,
Aye.
Mr. Couch. Nope, he's not. Mrs. Gutierrez Brayton,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner, Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs,
Emergency, yes.
Ms. Nguyen,
Yes.
Ms. Sheglian,
Aye.
through the chair, motion passes.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, John. Okay, our next item is a verbal report on Clean Air Act implementation. Want to borrow my cane?
Well, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tim Franquist, Air Quality Planning Director. I'll just give us an update here on what's becoming a fast and furious SIP changes. So with that, I'll kind of jump in. These first few slides that you're probably getting familiar with, I think it helps, kind of set the stage going forward. So this is just a really great representation here of, some of the physical challenges that we deal with here in the valley. And that's, of course, our large mountains, a basin, our high pressure systems that cause, ozone issues, certainly in the summer, and then hold the particulate matter in the winter. So with the basin this size, that adds to some of our physical challenges here in the valley. As we often mention, because it's very true, is that we are a high transported freight area. We do get a lot of traffic through here, which is why you hear us talk so much about mobile source emissions, because they are a big contributor here in the valley. And we can see with this map, just the traffic patterns through our district. And then again, just kind of how the hierarchy works here. Obviously, we operate purely under the Clean Air Act, which establishes our national ambient air quality standards. Ozone and PM 2.5 are the chemicals that we particularly deal with here in the valley. EPA establishes exactly what those standards are, along with the attainment planning criteria, and then they enforce the state implementation plan. So ultimately, when we submit a plan, we don't get credit for those plans to become, quote, federally enforceable and approved by the EPA. So that's one of their functions. And then for us in CARB at the district level, I think we have probably the biggest challenge with stationary sources, our area sources, which we have jurisdiction over. CARB does have some authority over mobile sources, which I know we've talked a lot about under the waiver. Otherwise, that's under the federal government. But again, something that we keep a very close eye on, because obviously mobile sources are a huge source of our issues here in the valley. So with that, obviously we've had a lot of successes over time. There are 6 criteria pollutants out there. We've taken on many of these over time. They do change, as stated in the last slide. EPA is required every 5 years to look at those standards. They typically do get more stringent over time. And here's just kind of a listing of those standards that we've accomplished. As we do that, we're required to put a maintenance plan in place, and that represents 2 10-year cycles. So once you get back into attainment, these maintenance plans are there to assure that you stay into attainment for 20-year cycles. So these are very long planning cycles that we're operating under. Okay, and then really, again, we like to put this here because I think it tells a lot of stories. One is just a tried and true formula of how do we get into attainment? How do we get these strategies in place? And one that's by rules and incentive programs, and Todd did a great job of describing how important those are. Collaboration with stakeholders. Again, this is not something just a district can do, but really does require residents, regulated community, agricultural community, coming together and getting solutions that make sense for the valley. And I think this is always true, but certainly more true, maybe even in the today. That gets us this accomplishment here that we see in the graph is substantial emission reductions over time. This is a huge accomplishment. When I first came in the district, I was shocked by seeing this. I didn't think this was possible. So it's a really encouraging graph. I think this graph also tells a second story. And I think we'll get into that. And that second story is, and this is true of any environmental system you're trying to remediate, water, soil, when you lower the concentrations or you get the concentrations very low, the challenge and complexity of getting to that next step is that much more difficult. So I think we said this during our study session, our successes is somewhat of our challenge. I think in the today, that's a good thing, but it also just as we get into some of the complexities that we'll talk about in a second, I think that's the second story this says is we have lower concentrations very low. And so, you know, the incentive programs are super, super important. Our stationary sources are certainly important, but so are those mobile sources. Okay, so just kind of jumping into our plans here. So we've talked a bit about this over time. This 2018 plan covered a few different standards. Good thing is we did meet the 1997 PM 2.5 standard, so we're good with that one. We did develop a 2012 standard plan in 2024. We'll talk a bit about that one. So I'll defer to that later. So for this slide, we're really talking about the 2006 standard, which we thought was behind us. As we had talked about earlier, this one did come back. Most recently, EPA put a Federal Register notice in saying they erred in the granting the 5-year extension back in 2019. So what that did is I reverted back the attainment date to 2019. And we were supposed to put a 5% plan in at that date. Of course, this decision just came now. We can't go back in time. And so there was a lawsuit that is compelling, or looks like it will compel the EPA to make a decision on the attainment status, which we know we're not attaining the standard for the 35 microgram standard. So what that will do is likely trigger a contingency measure. And for us, that would be the 4901 wood burning stove, which that will change the curtailment levels. Right now we have hotspot counties and non-hotspot counties. And what that will do is make everybody basically a non-hotspot county. We'll bring the curtailment levels down to 12 micrograms, and then everybody will be under the 35 microgram for that second level. The other piece of this is almost likely going to require us to do a 5% plan. And as we discussed in the past, that's a requirement to lower our either direct PM 2.5 emissions or precursors by 5% annually until we meet the standard. And so as you might expect, it's a very challenging a plan to put together.
By the way, just a really quick note on this one too, just if I could jump in. Just to give you an idea of where we were and where we are today on that one too. You know, we used to be in the 100 microgram range at one point, plus or minus depending on the year, but then we worked to get that to 65 micrograms. The standard here is 35. So we're working towards 35. This last year was the first year that all Valley air monitoring locations were below the 35, but you have to get that on a 3-year average. And so I think we're around 41 right now, if I remember the number correctly, relative to the 35. So the progress is significant and undeniable, but it still persists there. We're getting closer, but it's not quite there.
Okay, turning to the 2024 plan, this covers the 2012 annual PM 2.5 standard. Again, this is something we've talked extensively about because it is a huge issue, and this is obtaining the 5-year extension. What's critical about this is there's some really important time to develop a plan to meet the standard. And as we talked before, if we don't get the extension, which that time is running out here soon, I think there's some encouraging news that could happen. But if we weren't to get that plan, the extension in place, again, we'd be stuck with doing a 5% plan. For the 2012 standard, that would be a bit more challenging than even the 2006 one. So the complexity certainly increases. I wouldn't say exponentially, but certainly there for this plan as well. So a lot of discussion going on at every level. There's a full court press on this. And again, I think the encouraging news is we're heading in the right direction. That this would hopefully be approved, hopefully this summer. So we'll keep the board updated on this action. The next one, turning to ozone. So this is our 2012 ozone plan. Again, this one was highly affected by the waiver disapprovals. We had a lot of stationary source measures in there, but we did have a lot of the mobile source measures in there that did leave for a shortfall of emissions for that strategy. There was a lawsuit in 2024 that is compelling the EPA to make a final decision on that plan by July 17, 2026. So it's coming up. Can't be a proposal, can't be contemplated. It has to be a final action. So this is kind of a fast and furious plan that CARB is working on as well. This plan, because we're in an extreme, does allow for us to do what is referred to as the 182E5 plan, or a black box plan. You can defer emission reduction for emerging or enhanced programs to later on. You do have to do it within 3 years of the attainment date. In this case, is 2037. So it's not complete pass on this, but it does buy us some real critical time on developing what those measures are. So the adoption is here. That does look like what CARB is working on, and we've been working certainly closely with them on that plan as well. And then just turning as part of the 2015 ozone portion. Again, we talked a bit here about it, is our transportation conformity element of that. And so transportation conformity, again, is any federal project that we use money on for transportation projects can't cause or contribute to an air quality violation. And so that's modeled against what's referred to as the motor vehicle emission budgets. Because the emission reduction associated with the waivers drop, that means your freeboard for those motor vehicle emissions budgets also got squeezed. So right now, there's at least 2 counties that can't meet this motor vehicle emission budget, which means they can't move forward with their transportation improvement plans. Obviously, that's a huge challenge. Again, a lot of discussions at all levels, including CARB, on how they might pass that. The encouraging news, I think, when we first gave this update, it was something like 8 counties. We're down to 2. So, a lot of incredible technical and policy work going on here that encourages that hopefully there'll be a solution for this in the near future. If not, as you can see here, it does put at risk billions of dollars worth of transportation monies. Our district rules that are obviously tied to our plans is where we do get our emission reductions or substantial emission reductions for both stationary and area sources. The district, which, and I think it's true, a lot of areas have had rules in with EPA for 3 to 4 years that are not acted upon. That causes obviously some serious concern for regulated communities that are subject to these rules right now at the local level. So there's regulatory uncertainty there. As the EPA looks at these, depending on how long this time goes, the underlying data, the calculations, they can become dated and unusable at that point, which means we have to do rework, either resubmit a plan or rework, amend something. So again, the longer this goes on, it's just a host of different issues that go along with that. Some of our rules are actually tied to this 2022 ozone plan, or would be for revised plans. So again, we're just really encouraging EPA to move quickly on these issues so they don't get stale and we don't have to rework these rules, and then give regulated communities some certainty that what you're operating under currently is something that is certainly compliant now and would be compliant in the future. So just in kind of a spanner shot of what's out there in front of the EPA, you can see there's several of those rules out there. Again, a lot of stakeholder involvement goes in these, a lot of time and effort goes in there. So I think too, just, for the closure and for just getting regulatory certainty, it's really critical that the EPA works on these quickly. And then just kind of the doom and gloom piece, but it's an unfortunate reality of it. So when we don't have approved plans, or if we get a disapproval, obviously it's a discouraging sanctions process under the Clean Air Act, and that's with the 2-to-1 offsets for new or expanding permitted sources. So that's obviously a huge barrier for economic development. It also could lead to highway funds being lost. And in our case, it's 4.6 billion. So that's both jobs and construction, and then just the projects themselves. And then in 24 months, if we still don't have an approved plan, the EPA is required to step in and develop a federal implementation plan. Again, now we have folks well outside the area, not as familiar with the sources or the stakeholders developing plans for us. And again, we just want to avoid that federal takeover. And then the biggest takeaway is that obviously we have delayed health benefits as we don't get these different plans in place. We're just delaying the public health portion of it. And so just kind of bringing it kind of full circle here, kind of 3 main themes that we're really, advocating for is for the EPA to grant that 5-year extension for the 2024 PM 2.5 plan. It's absolutely critical. It gives us, an amount of time to figure out what a revised plan might look like, so we don't go into a 5% plan. Again, for the 2012, that we have workable motor vehicle emission budgets. CARB's at the table for that one, and that the EPA moves quickly on this. Now, the lawsuit will make them do that, but again, I think just in the future, it's important for them to continue that cadence. And again, here, timely EPA decisions on rules. So again, so our technical work doesn't become stale and outdated. We don't have to do rework there.
Through the chair, just a closing comment. First of all, definitely just express appreciation to board members, many of you who I know have been really active in different capacities. Looking at Dr. Pacheco-Werner and her dual role with the CARB role is a partnership with CARB. These plans only work, we're working well with them as well as the US EPA. And I think that dynamic can sometimes, I think be very interesting, with changing administrations and just trying to find, that common ground. And I think that's something that we're definitely trying to facilitate good conversations to help move forward, all of these different planning submissions, even with, what can sometimes appear to be, some political kind of difficulties there. So I just want to appreciate, just the board for stepping in different roles to keep supporting that, basically being solution oriented. And we'll probably keep coming back to you on a regular basis with these reports because, that as these issues develop, a lot of them are
very sort of short term in terms of timing. You know, over the next few months, I think there'll be developments on a lot of what Tim just covered. So we plan on just coming back on a regular basis to keep providing reports on where some of these different issues are, and appreciate your indulgence. I know the Clean Air Act SIP issues can be highly complex and sometimes very difficult to follow. So the goal here is to just make sure the board and the public have good access to timely updates on where, you know, these different things are, just given the critical nature, you know, under the act, as was summarized in that last slide, all the consequences, you know, when we cannot, receive approval and satisfy those federal requirements. So we'll keep you posted as this develops. Thank you.
Any questions for Tim? Any public comment? Oh, Dr. Sherry.
Yeah, I'm speaking as the ignorant, non-elected member of the board. Well, this is quite a fix. And it seems like we're largely there because of the federal refusal to approve CARB waivers, which would have made a significant impact on the mobile source issues. Because absent the waivers, CARB does not have any control over mobile sources. It's entirely a federal issue, and most of the pollution whose effects we get to deal with is in fact mobile source. There was discussion on the last item in terms of coordinating and collaboration among city councils and boards of supervisors to educate the state legislature about the importance of the supporting alternatives to ag burning. And what does this board need to do to help support our Valley congressional delegation or other avenues? This is big.
So through the chair, yeah, just a quick response on that, just looking at the clock too. And I just want to let me know if we can drill down a little bit deeper on that. But yeah, we've been from, you know, day one of the new administration, obviously with the last administration, continue to engage at all levels there to, you know, make sure they understand that the Valley, its efforts, pending submissions, and get, you know, hopefully support along the way. The board, you know, in various capacities, either through the staff or, you know, there's other bodies like the Regional Policy Council that have been active in just given the transportation nexus, who have also through the ACOGs essentially. They need solutions in place because the transportation dollars are a big part of the impact. There's been quite a bit of engagement, I would say, on the elected official side of it. We do plan, for example, on going to DC in the near future as well, and then later on in the year to continue describing exactly what you just heard today, just the need for there to be collaboration. I do also want to clarify that, you know, I think that the issues with our plans are complex. I think that there absolutely is an impact due to the federal actions, including the Congressional Review Act, disapprovals of a couple of these rules. I think that is part of the issue that we've seen with our SIPs for sure. I think that there was also significant impact from the state's own measures that were adopted and then withdrawn by CARB, you know, that were not actually related to disapproval. And that would be, for example, the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation, the locomotive regulation that were actually taken back by CARB after not being able to get them approved under the prior administration for years that they were with the prior administration. So I think that there's some complexities to the mobile, but I think that your point, I think, is true in that largely it's been the mobile source issues that have been the primary issue with these SIPs. And I think that's sort of the point that I took out of your comments. And so we do ultimately need both CARB and the federal governments to work together to figure out what is next to address mobile source emissions, as we also keep working on evaluating our local issues and where the opportunities are. And that is part of the message at both levels is we need you to basically work effectively within your own respective roles, as well as together to have whatever the next generation of strategy is. So that is in the works. There was an update, for example, recently at the CARB board meeting that I'm sure Dr. Pacheco-Werner was going to mention in her comments where there was an update to their board on where CARB is with their mobile source
efforts. And it's just going to be an ongoing conversation in the coming years on that level.
Thank you, Samir. All right, do we have any public comment on this item?
Modesto, do you have any public comments?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Bakersfield, do you have any public comments?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno? I see none in person. We do have one online comment. Christian Bisher.
Hi, Christian.
Hey, good morning, Christian Bisher. I was just hoping maybe Tim could clarify. He had mentioned that the 2006 8-hour PM 2.5 standard may require the 5% plan. And then if the 2012 PM 2.5 plan did not get that 5-year extension, that it might need one. Because they're both PM 2.5, would a single, I mean, you'd have to have one for each plan, but would the same emission reductions be able to be used for both? Or would you have to have 5% reductions for one plan and an additional 5% for the other? So yeah, that was my only question. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and we're happy to talk to Mr. Bisher some more about that question. I think, yeah, I think that's definitely part of what this is uncharted territory. So I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about that. There's some theoreticals there that, that there's a matrix of different things that may or may not happen. So I think we'd have to, happy to follow up and
thank you.
Try to address the question.
All right, this is not an action item, so we will move on to item 12, which is a verbal report on the California Air Resources Board activities. Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, definitely lots of activity as Samir mentioned. There is a ongoing conversation of what is next on the multiple source strategy. So I would definitely welcome as you review those ongoing plans, and there have been some workshops, definitely more workshops planned on that front. I think them hearing from the Valley is really critical, and I really thank the efforts that have been done thus far to bring board members to the Valley as these questions around multiple sources are discussed, so that we ensure that when a strategy is presented, it is a strategy that's going to work for us here. And so I definitely intend to stay very engaged on that matter. And I do hope for more opportunities to engage our CARB board members on the local level to understand the opportunities and challenges here. And also because we have a lot of new board members. And so there is a need for sort of getting them all up to speed on where the Valley is on its unique challenges. So, and opportunities. And so that is definitely top of mind. Also, next month, the proposed changes in the regulation are published for the Cap and Invest program. Again, a lot of these changes were directed by the legislature. And so it is about implementing some of those directions. But I definitely do encourage everyone in the public and fellow board members to be involved in the process. There is an open comment period right now through the end of the month. And so that vote will be next month. And as a reminder, right, it is a program by which the Valley does receive a lot of funding through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And so it is critical to our region here for a lot of our goals in emission reductions. So not just climate, but that co-benefit space of emission reductions as well. And next week, inspired by our study session, which I am so proud of for our staff. Yes, because I do think it is innovative and really fantastic. So CARB will be having a study session of their own in Northern California. And I think it is a fantastic opportunity for the board members to learn about some more of these issues. And You can bet I will be interjecting with San Joaquin Valley specific questions and issues and knowledge. So lots and lots. It is definitely picking up for us. So please stay engaged and feel free to stay engaged with me. And I do get letters from some even former Air District members on some of these issues, ongoing issues at the CARB level. And I really appreciate the engagement from everyone on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chigwar. Okay, Executive Director comments.
Thank you, Chair. Just a presentation that I believe is going to be up here. Just want to give you a quick update on some direction that we received from the board from the study session. You don't need a title slide for this one. But we did update and are going to make available to the board as well as publicly on our webpage the county by county air quality information kind of like fact sheet. So this is another way of trying to communicate what's going on. So it's not the annual report. This is just a one pager basically by county of the trends in air quality, where it used to be, where it is today, some of the same types of information that you saw in the report, but at a county by county level. So we have one for valley-wide and we have one by county. And there's a number of stakeholders that I think just like this information, just to have an easy reference sheet of what the air qualities look like. So I just wanted to share that with you. We'll email this electronically and we'll give you a link as to where it is on our webpage in case you want to point anybody to it. But just want to flip through these and just give you a sense of how these look by county. They look really good. I think they're easy to, in our opinion at least, to follow. And we're always open to ideas, suggestions. That's a great thing about our outreach team here is that they're nimble and being able to respond to any suggestions that you might have. So let us know if you have any ideas, but this is in direct response to the direction the board provided this last fall at the study session. So appreciate that. Thank you.
And all the printing, the colors all are the same and all?
You mean by
Supervisor Pereira, did you notice everything okay with the colors of the print?
these colors might actually work a lot. He's not there.
Yeah.
But I noticed that these colors appear to be a better color format, so we can probably use these in the report.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you.
So with that, any governing board member comments? Okay, seeing none, just a reminder, next month we are meeting a week earlier, May 14th, correct?
Yes, the meeting due to quorum issues and just making sure that we had a good level of attendance has been moved to May 14th. That's the budget hearing. There's also the possibility of a board meeting depending on whether or not there's any urgent items in addition to the budget hearing, but just wanted to thank you.
Okay.
Clarify that's the date so you don't, show up to our office
right.
the following week and there's no meeting. So thank you.
Here. All right, thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned. Oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry. Deborah?
Thank you. I just want to thank the board, San Joaquin Valley and the board for continuing to work with our Tune In and Tune Up program. And we are having our annual one in May on the 9th at Merced Fairgrounds in Los Banos. So I've been pushing that over the last several months with our community and it's always been a good turnout. Unfortunately, more people are having to hang on to their older vehicles due to the cost of purchase for new vehicles. So I hope that this is going to be a positive event in our community to help people be able to pass smog. And if there is any money left over for the purchase of new vehicles, that might be an alternative for them as well. So thank you to the board and to our district.
All right. With that, meeting adjourned.